technically.
We're gonna wait for
2
Lynn to
minutes go.
put his recorder out too.
Well, let's live with that and go.
We're close enough. I'm gonna call the meeting to order. This is the Holiday Island City Planning Commission meeting of 11/17/2021. It's 9 a.m. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, let me.
Okay. Roll call.
Chairman Keys,
Here.
Vice Chair Pittman,
Here.
Council Commissioner Elwood,
Here.
Commissioner Mills,
Here.
Commissioner Graves,
Here,
Secretary Dumas here, all present.
All right, I declare a quorum. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Make a motion, we approve the agenda as submitted.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Jerry seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Agenda is approved. We have minutes that were distributed from the November 9th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Pat made the motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ken seconded it. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Minutes are approved. We have no reports, no committees, so we can move on to old business, continued discussion of proposed zoning regulations. But before we start, we pass on a couple of comments. I talked to Mickey Finefield again yesterday on the phone. I was going to try to get up to the office up there and actually measure how much space we needed for planning for file cabinets in the event that we end up getting all of those files, which he's still working with Tom on. But there's only actually 8 file cabinets.
Oh.
And one of them is just as supplies. So there's 7 cabinets that have actual file-worthy information in them. So we'll have ample room in the office down there for those files, if and when we get them. I'm still pretty much assuming we're going to get them. So, but Mickey is still working with Tom.
You take Tom out for lunch or something, buy him lunch, you probably give him
Well, I don't know if Tom is waiting for me to come and talk to him.
Well, he told me he was.
But, huh?
He told me that.
Oh, yeah. All right,
I
well,
saw him last Friday at the bank.
all right. Then maybe I'll have to make arrangements to see him. I had been working through the planning commission because I assumed that the planning commission was actually responsible for all of that.
Well, I know that that's.
So, Lynn, you want to take over going on our continued journey through the zoning?
Sure.
ordinance?
This is all reference to the 69 pages of the proposed zoning regulations, and we left off last time we met at the bottom of page 15, finishing the definitions. We're going to follow the document in its order, not the suggested rearrangement that I came up with before for how it might end up looking, but we'll just follow through. So we're at the top of page 16.
You're going to start with 14040?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
14040, it's the continuance of use. The only notes that I have in mind are the comments that we have to be careful in understanding how this fits for grandfathering any non-conforming structural issues. And I guess I didn't see any reason to change it because it seems like it's legalese to me.
Well, it says any lawful use of structure is not conformed use shall be deemed to be lawfully.
The issue of grandfathering is probably going to end up you know, something that, like Lynn said, is gonna be a legal issue. I did talk to Mickey again about that yesterday, and one of the reasons why we would want to have the files is because the files contain all of the variances that the planning commission has granted to different property owners over the years to either build too close to the property line or, you know, build some sort of structure that wasn't necessarily to the covenant or whatever. And you know, it would seem, the way I would like to approach it going forward is, you know, if somebody has if we find that someone in the future has a structure or something that's in violation of our zoning ordinance, if they have a document from the planning commission that says that they were issued a variance at the time, a variance to the covenant at the time to do that, then that would, you know, probably need to be grandfathered. However, if somebody did something without seeking approval and has violated the covenant at the time, in other words, they don't have a document that says that the variance was approved, and now it also violates a city ordinance, you know, are we going to be able to take legal action, or are they still grandfathered even though it was against the covenants at the time? So it kind of touches on us, you know, retroactively enforcing the covenants.
But there
I don't know if that's going to be legal.
There would probably be some instances where the variance was granted, the work was done, and it's never followed up. I mean, you could find something that's non-compliant that had a variance.
Well, there's a whole lot of issues that have happened lately that, you know, they never got approval, they just went ahead and did it.
Well,
That's true, but there's also, I mean, if it's old enough, there's also the law, I think it's called adverse possession. So if you exceeded something and it's past the statute of limitations, it's automatically grandfathered. That's not the legal terminology for it. I don't know that we need to get it all that to that depth. If we just make what we need to do, and the issue comes up, it's a legal issue. It's not something we have to necessarily cover in the, I don't think.
Well, the section A says at the end, shall be deemed to be a legal, non-conforming use and may be continued except as otherwise provided. And it goes on to say what conditions affect it. So I don't think we can discover something in the future that's non-conforming and force anybody to change anything. Because this says we're going to say it's legal, non-conforming.
okay.
Bite the bullet and leave it.
Yeah.
If it burns down or something and they have to rebuild it, then it comes, then they gotta bring it up to code.
That's kind of what I was thinking, the actual legal position would be. However, there's going to be people that are going to be very disappointed in our lack of ability to retroactively fix problems, especially when there was a rush to do things quick before the ordinances were passed. And in order to be able to be grandfathered, the quicker we get these ordinances passed, the better, because there's some of that, you know, rush to violate before it's illegal. There's some of that going on right now.
Okay. Section 41, discontinuance of use. So that language is talking about what happens when you quit using a property and puts a time frame of 6 months on it in section B. Any comments about that? Is that long enough, short enough, comfortable enough? Town has used it for a number of years.
Yeah.
Oh, and in that regard, I did contact Town Planning Commission, and the person I talked to surveyed several planning commissioners, asking if they had any sections of these regulations that we're modeling ours from that are concerns, and they said they basically don't. If we had other concerns, we should go to a higher level. It's the Northwest Regional Planning District. Okay, otherwise I think it's pretty clear. 42, change of use. So it describes what a change of use is. And that would be a condition where a non-conforming use without, if it gets changed and it says you can't be non-conforming anymore, you have to fix the problem and be conforming to our ordinances. Again, that the name of the Board of Zoning Adjustment, and I'll be honest, I haven't reviewed our most recent document that we're going to consider the City Council about building code, but we're going to name them the same. This Board of Adjustment, the Zoning Board of Adjustment, the Board of Zoning Adjustment. I'm going to use the same name that we use there, so I'll make that consistent throughout all of our documents.
Okay.
I need to mark that as a blue just to be sure I catch it. Okay. So in 43, repairs and alterations, I did find that second sentence that says such structures shall be expanded once, a maximum of 25% in gross floor area, or expansion 5,000 feet, whichever is less. I think that's in contradiction to what's in B and D, the following paragraphs, which basically say you can't alter the building. If you alter the building, it has to be subject to the current ordinance. It can't be non-conforming any longer. Is it okay if I strike that?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're basically saying if you alter the building in any way, and it doesn't say the perimeter, but it does say in D, respects to its yards, height, and any other element of bulk regulated by these. So it does do some description of what does it mean to expand it, but that should be pretty clear. So if you expand or alter a property that's non-conforming, it can't be non-conforming anymore. You have to fix the use. Okay, in 44, accessories to primary non-conforming uses. The only section that I thought we ought to add the words non-conforming, so that it says alteration, enlargement, or relocation of non-conforming use. To make it clear, it's all about non-conforming.
Yeah.
Okay. If the building in 45, if it's damaged or destroyed, then
Why would you let them reconstruct it?
right, this simply, we don't want to, so that's why this is here. But if it's non-conforming and it's damaged or destroyed, you can't build it back to be non-conforming. It has to be built back into conforming use.
I don't see where it says that it has to be conforming. It says if you build it back within 6 months, you can build it back in a non-conforming. Oh,
I read that wrong. You're right.
Yeah, I read it wrong.
If the
I read it,
structure,
and it says
yeah.
if you do it, reconstruct it in 6 months, you can go back to your original. I don't think we want to, I mean, that.
No, I read it wrong too.
Okay, I skipped over it.
Well, also, I mean, repair, it's maybe there was a small fire that had to be repaired. Wouldn't you allow them to continue after they fix the damage?
Repair it, but you can't reconstruct it.
Well, I mean, I'm just
Yeah,
saying
you're
they're
right.
both covered in the same sentence, so.
I know, but I don't think you want to allow, if you have a non-conforming building and it burns to the ground, you don't want to rebuild it as a non-conforming
No,
building.
we have to rebuild the next code. What do we need to do?
What do you mean, what do we need?
To change, I mean,
You need to fix this.
You just take
Need
out
to separate
reconstruct it,
repair
just say
from-
repair.
Totally damaged.
and just take the reconstructed out.
I don't think you could make them, not allow them to repair it, but you can't, you wouldn't want to reconstruct it.
I know some cities will put a percentage
The loss.
of the loss.
That's a good idea.
Now, what that percentage is.
Yeah, and how you calculate it.
Yeah.
I don't.
That would make sense, I mean, you got to have something,
You have to have something measurable.
yes. because, you know,
75% of
You
the,
know, if it's a 99% loss, I mean, they may say, well, yeah, I'm gonna repair it, you know?
75% of the square footage or something like that?
Or 50% of the roof, or,
50. I don't know, I mean, reading it right now,
yeah, it says they can rebuild it, doesn't it?
I got a little bit of a problem coming up with an arbitrary percentage.
Right.
Who's gonna determine that, the fire marshal or the insurance company? Or-
I think if you just leave it, maybe repaired. I mean, repaired doesn't mean rebuild.
Well, we have to take out the word then destroyed in the second line, first word.
Well, then, but do we have someplace that says that you can't, you know, rebuild a non-conforming structure?
Well, that's what this covers, damage and destruction.
That your
I just say if it's destroyed,
That
it's
sign
not,
of
you can't
percentage
rebuild.
loss.
Yeah, but it's a non-conforming. I can't remember what it is.
Well, that's not.
But I didn't handle a whole lot of properties out of it. Yeah, there is. But generally, it's defined not necessarily as a percentage, as opposed to the cost of repairs. I think all you need to do plus the salvage value equals, so it's a little different. I think that that we repair in or take out the, destruction and rebuild. Can't do it.
Or this is bound to be found in other cities, maybe just look at a
That's what
couple of other cities.
Find some more research on it, okay. I'll take that as an assignment. I'll look in some other, see if I can find language about damage and destruction of non-conforming structures and how they do it.
Yeah, it'd be, I'm gonna take this call here. You guys can continue on.
Sure.
I would like to give you a call. I happen to,
Hello?
well, a really good friend that handles property claims only.
Yes.
He's retired in holiday items, so maybe I'll give him a call.
Okay.
He probably would have to review some of the statutes on a fire claim. I didn't really handle fire claims, I was more, broken bones and stuff. But I know he did, and he did a lot, so he may give us some advice. I think it's all.
And the concern that, like Jerry said, is some way to measure a loss. How to define what the loss is. Because for here, it's fire happens, but it's probably more likely going to be high winds, that a tree falls across the corner of the building or takes a part of the roof off.
How we differentiate those things.
Yeah.
And an insurance policy is all economic,
Sure.
but that's not necessarily.
Kind of the
what
different
we want.
reason, yeah.
We have a different issue. So, let me see if I can help you a little bit.
I think you're gonna have a hard time putting a percentage on it.
Well, it may not be a percentage, it may be
Yeah, but I,
necessarily left a
this
little
is
bit.
the first time this has come up in planning regulations, that somebody.
I would bet Eureka Springs has something in
Well,
there,
and I was about to say that historic district,
stuff, Yeah.
but they definitely have some way to measure that,
non-conforming
Yeah, I
issues.
mean, a percentage.
Well, percentage is real.
Well, if you can put a tape measure to it, it's not difficult, but.
Well, tape measure to it, but that's, you don't have, when you have a fire,
Right.
wind starting, you don't have you may have, some sheet rock there, some sheet rock there, you don't measure,
Yeah,
how do you, if it's not economic damage, how do you figure a percentage?
No,
You're gonna replace 2 pieces of sheet rock and some spackling, is that 50% of a wall? No, because there's studs behind, it's real complicated if you wanna do it on a percentage like
Sure.
that, as opposed to an economic. I wonder if we couldn't just put a dollar figure on it.
And using words like substantial or extraordinary,
too-
those are
too vague.
arbitrary, yeah.
That's so wishy-washy, yeah.
Mhm.
I don't, maybe it'd be better to try to figure out, well, let's see what others.
Yeah, I'll look. I've
And
got several here.
Been a wheel.
I think if it's repairable, then you could let it go. And it's just
Everything's repairable.
What do you call repairable? I
You
mean,
still have to have a
if the
limit.
foundation remains, they can say the repair is,
Foundation up.
foundation up.
Yeah, you're right. I could have nothing but poured footings, well, that's repairable, all I have to do is build
Repair it.
on top of it, or I got a slab, and all I gotta do is.
Okay.
I know a house out here and the fire started in the garage and swept through for half the house. And, they totally repaired it.
can't use insurance.
Yeah, and it just typically a fire will go up and through the attic and stuff, so it's not like, what are you measuring?
Sure.
Or the percentage? I think
I'll-
it's
Good
just-
question.
I think it's gonna ask a lot of trouble to do it that way.
I'll look for, we definitely want to have something here for that, but we
Yeah,
don't know what
I
the
don't know
language to
what.
be. Okay, I'll do some more research on that. So in 46, district changes, whenever the boundaries are changed, the foregoing provisions shall also apply to newly created non-conforming uses. So what it says is if we take a zone that was one and we move it over and include a few more blocks or a few more streets, that might create a situation, there's non-conforming issues in the new area. We're gonna say the stuff up above in the text applies. It'll continue, it'll be legal until you change.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Now, 14.060, this is the list that's in this document, so we didn't lose track of what they were all about, but I thought it was good just to look at how they've set up their
Gotta admit
town.
one here.
That they've defined their residential areas by lot size, and then when you get into the details of each one of the zones, they determine population density or houses density. So we don't have that luxury here because it's already done. But having a zoning regulation looks like this will help us if other areas want to be developed, new streets put in within our city limits. So that's why you maybe prepare them this way to start with, so that the new builders and contractors would have, what are they up against if I want to put in a street and put in 10 lots? So if we define them with this type of language, we also need to somehow come up with language that says the already established lots are what they are, basically. They may not conform to this list. But again, it's backwards. An R1 lot in Holiday Island is not 1 acre minimum. Most of them are quarter acre, plus or minus. Most of them. But then you go down our street here and there's lots that are 26 feet wide because the way you broke them up.
And an R2 isn't a single family residence either.
Right. So that's the reconciliation that I have to go through to make our current situation match however we describe and use them.
So since I was admitting someone when you were explaining that initially, you're gonna leave these in, or
No,
we're gonna go to what
said
the
I put
covenants
them-
have?
I left them here for us to look at how they've designed them in their documents, so when we get further in document, understand why they put certain limitations on it.
Okay,
But it doesn't fit what we've done in Holiday Island, is what
Okay.
I was saying.
so it's here for reference.
Yeah.
For the time being, and,
And the thought
That's
about
good.
what do we want to do for the future.
yeah,
I-
add stuff,
So,
possibilities in for the future.
yeah, so that when we have a regulation in place, so if a new development wants to take place, they want to put a new street, build new lots, what restrictions are they going to have? What zones, what do they have to do for the zone?
Like we might put in light industrial
Exactly.
or something. Yeah.
Someone might want to
Okay.
do that. So I don't know what to say or add to that other than,
It gives you food for thought, though.
okay. So my intent then for putting this together for what we're going to have is to describe our zones the way they are. Without describing how big they are. Is that the right thing to do? Because we're trying to
Unless
cover
the
what's already been
covenant,
done.
unless the covenants had some,
There's nothing in the covenant about land size for
Yeah.
lots. None of the covenants talk about size of lots.
I don't think we have a lot of choice with the situation we've got.
right.
There's not hardly, I don't know if there's 2 lots, well, there are. That's fine. I don't know.
Yeah, the 3 lots that I own that all adjoin each other are 1.02 acres. It's 3 lots. So they're about a third of an acre, at least in my neighborhood.
Mine are pretty good size.
That's right, because you're on an outside radius of a curve and the streets are close enough together, they didn't divide it up.
I think they're over an acre.
Yeah, I think the R1s probably vary from maybe a tenth or under
Mhm.
to well over an acre in some cases, so.
It's just gonna be confusing.
A suggestion would be maybe we put in the ordinance not less than a quarter of an acre.
Well,
For
you're gonna have some.
For future,
Well, for future, yeah.
right, because anything that exists that's smaller than that is non-conforming.
In other
to
words,
the-
if someone's platting.
Right,
Yeah,
I don't
because,
know what- okay. I don't know.
That would be
Okay, yeah. I don't know what 96.
yeah, because I think it was a big mistake when they replatted along Woodsdale to make these 30-foot wide lots. I think that was a big mistake.
Well, yeah, it's a big mistake, and we tried to correct it, and they said we couldn't do it.
Yeah, right.
That's-
I gotta
That's,
mute somebody here.
that's somebody announcing they're in.
No,
no, just one of our participants.
okay, we're good now.
Yeah, that's gotta be good.
Okay, so,
As long as, people don't get confused with the current zoning, or whatever we call it, classification,
Mhm.
I'm not sure that there's, those 30-foot lots up there are just an atrocity. Totally.
There's really nothing we can do about those, but any future, plots, you can put a minimum of quarter acre, and that's sufficient.
okay,
Why would you not want to stay with?
so the
Your
concern,
minimum there now is, I thought was a third of an acre.
so the concern is, if you get down to what they described here as R3, a density of 3 units per acre, are we gonna have a lot that's a quarter acre? Or are they gonna, no, it'd be a bigger acre, it'd be bigger than a quarter of an acre. Yeah, Dan, what we, to bring you up to speed, what we've been talking about is how to describe for the future what R1 lots would be. And we've suggested or considered that not less than 1 acre in size in the future.
R1 being,
Single family residential,
No, not less than.
not
like
less
a
than a quarter acre.
quarter acre.
Yeah, I thought that was.
Whatever I said.
Most of us would be non-conforming.
A lot of them will be non-conforming, the present ones, but we're talking about putting an ordinance in place for the future.
yeah, I wonder how many unimproved lots in Holiday Island would be excluded from being able to get a building permit then for a single family residence. How many lots are there in Holiday Island that are?
All the
less
currently
than-
plotted ones would be grandfathered in, though.
This would be if there's any acreage that needs
It's
a
new plots, not
Or
existing.
there's a parcel that somebody wants to subdivide and build houses on it, put in infrastructure.
So they couldn't stick a whole bunch of
Only-
tiny homes
only
or
thing,
something,
if
maybe.
they go into the patio homes or stuff like that, you get a lot higher density and smaller footprint.
Which section of the code are you in?
We're right at the top of 14.060.
14,
We're just trying to define, rather than saying, what's in this document is 1 acre minimum lot size, that we thought it probably should be something smaller than that.
Does that 14061 take care of if somebody wanted to come in and put in some more townhouses or
patio homes and stuff. Am I reading
That is a good point.
Am I reading that correctly, that you could have a special zoning or an intensive zoning district that would be outside of these? Is that what I read?
You could call it something different, yeah.
That's what I'm reading. It seems to me that's what it's saying.
To be honest, I'm in the gray, the shadow. What does the intent of 61 really mean? I don't really understand that. Because it's talking about the
overlay or spatial purpose districts are not included in the zoning district hierarchy. So
right, because in the state of Arkansas, we can create overlays and special purpose districts. And it, I don't understand them. I haven't studied that well, but we're talking about what the state permits.
I mean, there are, you know, this is a thing, a coming thing, you know, for patio homes or whatever, you know, where they're building them and, you know, with a common.
We have an example of that on Blue Water, I think is what it's called, right off of Woodsdale. There's a group of 3 homes there with a common space in the middle of them.
Right down.
Just right over here.
Yeah, yeah, it's, like metal work.
Yeah, that sounds right.
There's like 4 of them in a group.
Right.
And they have a common area, and you're gonna have that.
Well, but that might fit in this description up above where it's single family residential R4, where the density should not exceed 4 units per acre. It wouldn't necessarily be an overlay, it could just be you zoned the area to permit that.
Oh,
And we don't have to,
8,000 square foot lot's not very big, is it?
no,
No, but by the same token, a 1/4 acre lot in most cities is a very big lot.
Huh?
I don't know what the typical lot size is.
Do you want to know the conversion of square footage to a 1/4 acre?
I had it written down someplace, but yes.
Do you
Well,
know?
it says
I don't have
four units per acre.
I can look it up.
You just ask Google. Oh, wait a minute, you can't do that.
I got, if I can find the app, I can do it.
061 would take care of that, because you know, come in with higher densities. So they more restrictive, less intensity, more.
Where is that? Oh, here it is.
I think you're gonna have to deal with it,
Okay. Area. So,
especially when somebody builds tiny homes.
oops.
According to the US Census Bureau, the median size of a lot for new construction in 2018 was 8,982 square feet, about 1/5 of an acre.
Okay. 1 acre is 43,000 plus square feet.
Plus,
Okay, so 9,600 square feet is roughly a 1/4 of an acre.
A
Just
1/4 of an acre is 10,890 square feet.
10,890.
So it's R4 8,000 is just under a 1/4 of an acre.
So, like I said, except for the zoning actually names and the way they've gone through them, this isn't a good fit for Holiday Island, because the R1s are they were 1 acre, R2s were 1/2 acre, R3s were less than a 1/4 of an acre. You know, we have to adapt it to what we got.
well, I thought this was for future, because it doesn't correspond with what we have. You know, when you talk about R1 and R2 and R3, everybody thinks of what.
Do you really need all these categories?
We don't need them all, unless we want to have them.
And also in 061 down here, do we need to divide them into, know what's less restrictive or more restrictive, or even have a hierarchy? Is that even necessary out here?
Well, you know, the issues are gonna come up, and you're gonna have to make exceptions to
I'm just thinking that making exceptions and having the rules has nothing to do with hierarchy. Am I, unless I'm missing something.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a problem with writing zoning ordinances that really only apply going forward. And because of the backward confusion that it's gonna create. If we have more zoning options than currently exist, and we start using those going forward, you know, how does that confound the district's assessment structure and all of that? And
Well, you'd have to do a reassessment.
a reassessment with more classifications.
Right.
So your concern is if a parcel is to be subdivided into lots, how would the district handle it if it didn't have a scheme that matched what they're currently using? What would they do with that?
No, I'm just, I would like for the zoning ordinances to be as compatible as possible with what's already here and not be unique in a lot of ways from what's already here, just because of the confusion that it's going to create.
I think what we have is R1 through R4 and then C1 and C2, is that what current ones are?
You can answer, I can answer that question when you look a few more pages down. I copied in a chart.
Okay.
Well, here's a thought, and it kind of gets into economic development. If you could foresee using some plot of land, whether it's up at the park or someplace else in the Holiday Island thing, or if we were to annex, let's say, some area in the future into Holiday Island. I mean, for maybe a light industrial, or let's say a warehouse, or something bigger than what we have now as a little commercial space up in the park, wouldn't we need to want to maybe assess that more because of the water, the sewer, the usage of stuff differently? I'm just thinking out loud that there may be a need to come up with a light industrial or a medium industrial or something like that to add to the permitted uses. And just thinking, not that we have any place to put it right now, but we may figure out some place to put it in the future.
I think we need to decide what we're going to do about the residential.
Well, just getting back to the very first question, you know, how big should a lot be for R1 residential? If I were a developer and I saw an opportunity, I could develop this piece of property here, and I could put 5 lots per acre, it may be far more financially viable for me to develop that tract than if I can only get 4 lots per acre, because I'll probably not, the price of the lots probably isn't going to change very much. So,
does anyone know? I believe all the Wedgewood, the Ironwood, and the Oak Point condos are all R1s.
No.
And what are they, Ken?
Well, I just looked at sheet that he has there.
They don't have.
This is Tawny Town.
I don't have a copy of any covenants for those areas.
Is that you couldn't find it?
There isn't one.
Okay.
there might not be a covenant, but there'd be an assessment on our number.
I believe they're assessed at R1s. I'm pretty sure of that.
I should know, I used to live there, but.
Each doorbell has an assessment?
The who?
Each doorbell has an assessment, each
Yeah.
front door.
Yeah,
Okay. He doesn't
they
have
each
to-
pay separate
Ironwood,
assessments.
The townhouses don't have a code on them.
I don't have a covenant to see how they're restricted.
Well, but, you know, I mean, those footprints for those condos in all those cases are quite small.
Very small. And that's what I was talking about, if you get into future development.
That's what the people are gonna wanna build, that kind of density, yeah.
It's gonna happen. I mean, because down there in front of Tom's house, when I was on the board, we replatted that for some kind of smaller footprint homes. I don't remember what they were called.
I wonder if the Oak Point Condo Association or the Wedgewood Condo Association would have a copy of their covenants. Might.
We should.
Hang on, somebody's here.
Well, I don't know, maybe there's no way to, make our new correspond with the old, I don't know. I mean, there's gonna be some confusion with people,
Well, the additional confusion that I have or concern is that when I go to do the map, because we've said this is R1, this is C1, and this is R2, the intent was to mark each lot with how it's zoned, but the surrounding or enclosed parcels won't have a zoning color on them. But we should have language in our document that says, like we do in our proposal, that surrounding areas will help dictate what happens in those parcels. We have that in our land use plan.
the R1 and, the designation of R1, R2, et cetera. First, the only thing that those are assigned for now is for assessments, really.
Well, in a given unit, it dictates in the covenants the minimum size of the home and some other exceptions, but that's it. We can't do that in ours.
But I'm saying that the current designations have more to do with assessment than designating anything else. I mean, it's R1 is a single resident regardless of what size of lots or anything. R2 is
Duplex.
duplexes, and 3 is more than 2. Okay, 3, 4, 6. But that's where that's one of the big issues they have right now is R3 is assessed at one assessment, and there may be 4 units in it. So it's just a dumbass thing to excuse my French.
Is it true that the zones, the R1, 2, whatever designation for the covenants existed before the assessment was created? Isn't that true? So the assessment was based on the zoning at the time. That's the way the assessor divided it up.
No, it's
No,
Didn't they build Holiday Island with plots and zoning before the assessment existed?
It was done very flaky in the beginning. If you go back and look at the first assessment,
Yeah.
you might want to do that.
But it strictly
I can't remember if,
designates what you're gonna
because
do.
they assessed everybody at the same rate. They didn't,
Okay.
commercial, I think everything was always at the same.
So the
Was
zoning
commercial
exist-
at the same rate originally?
There's a C1 and a C2.
So for assessments, starting from the beginning? I can't
Far
remember.
back as you can find.
have
But
to
I
go
would
back
guess
and
the
look.
zoning existed before the assessment did.
I don't know.
I think, I would bet they were put on about the same time. The covenants and the first assessment probably came about the same time.
I guess, if we're gonna set this up though, I guess, just
After the meeting, we can go back and look at the first assessment.
the current R1s, R2s have nothing to do with zoning, I don't think, so much. I mean, other than our, says it's residential.
Well, obviously this 40 dot, or the .060, the districts established will have to match what we've got. And whether we go forward with putting it in here for the future, I guess we can decide that a little bit later.
And it almost seems like we need to make a table again, like you did once before, of, you know, okay, these are all the different types of, you know, buildings that there are in Holiday Island, and these are, you know, whether it makes sense or not, this is what they're currently classified as and being assessed as, because, you know, like Ken was alluding to, you have like Wedgewood and Ironwood and Oak Point, where each individual condo has a deed. It is, they get, you know, they pay property tax on their unit, and they pay an assessment on their unit, independent of all the other units in, even the one on the other side of the wall in the same building that they're in. And then you have other units in Holiday Island here where you have, it's a fourplex, and there's only one assessment, because that got into this property or this owner privileges discussion a couple of years ago when I was on the board, that you know, people were complaining that only one of the four people in the building
Could be the owner.
You know, they each shared, they each paid 1/4 of the assessment, but only one unit got the pass to use the pool and stuff like that.
Whether the county carries that as 4 units or 1.
Yeah, so there, even though you have 4 units,
This
it's
one,
zoned probably R1 or something, I
yeah,
don't know.
this Wild Goose Landing, right there, the first one to the left, that they paid one assessment for those 4 units there.
Yeah, well,
And then 2 over is the one where I had a condo, and we all had separate assessments, even though it was all in the same.
yeah, well, we fixed that once, and then they went back and messed it up.
You know, the board was changing things back and forth that they didn't have the authority to do.
Well, that's the problem, nobody got any authority to do anything, fix anything, struggling with it.
So for today, we're gonna skip over 14-06,
Yeah,
till we have some more.
whatever we define them to be, that'll on our new list to replace this one.
Well, I think,
In 61, I just put in blue for my own note that we consider whether it's even a hierarchy or not. Because there's other language in this document that talks about lesser and greater and whatever, as far as being restrictive. To me, it's confusing.
Yeah, do we really care?
Yeah. Okay, so in 62, I just simply put in the city of Holiday Island, Arkansas zoning map, so that it was clear that it was our map. There was a city recorder, treasurer. I didn't find any problem with anything else except in section C at the very end, that no changes to the nature should be made on the official map and contained in the city code. And we don't have a city code yet that defines what's punishable for making reservations or untrue representations. So what this says is that if you take one of our documents and mess with it and present that as the official document, that's illegal, and there'll be a fine associated with it.
do we need to do that, or can we just?
I read it in some statute that if we don't define it, if we don't say that it's illegal, then we can't take somebody to task for
Well, I mean,
doctoring up our
I said,
documents.
no, I meant, that's not what I meant. Will be considered a violation of those regulations. What if we put a period there, and then we write the code, and the code says something that a violation of the regulations would be like a Class C misdemeanor. It's a small point, it doesn't make any, we need it in both places, is what I'm getting at, since we don't have a city code at this point in time.
Okay.
Can we just, a violation of these regulations, the code will say a violation of the regulations is a Class C misdemeanor as defined below.
Okay.
It's just a thought, I'm not trying to.
I'm questioning why the city would feel responsible for dealing with that. If trying to think of a situation where somebody would print off our zoning ordinance, doctor it up, gain some advantage from doing that, and then the city would have to take them to task, because the city is going to enforce, we're going to enforce our zoning ordinance. If somebody comes to us and tries to get a building permit, or somebody tries to get a plot plan approved, and they present us with a fraudulent document, we're just gonna say that, I don't know where you got that from, but that's not our zoning ordinance.
Yeah, I think we can just drop or see.
Well,
And if for some reason somebody even gets beyond that point, and they build something, and then find out that it was built under a fraudulent code, it's, would seem to be between the
I don't know how,
perpetrator and the person that had the work done.
how could
Okay.
that happen, because if they come and get a building permit, that's going to be issued based on our.
The only way it could happen is if the person issuing the permit takes the copy of the document that the person is handing them and doesn't verify that it's authentic.
another scenario
I
that came to
guess.
mind when I was studying this, trying to figure out what's it all about, is if, when the day comes that Lynn Dumas is no longer on the planning commission and he goes into your system and changes your documents for you. Or he's still a planning commissioner, he goes in and changes your documents for you.
I don't know, I think
So
that
the public, the contractors and whatever, it holds us accountable for our documents.
So you're thinking Lynn Dumas would be a disgruntled
I don't-
former
For whatever
whatever?
motive he had, maybe he needed to change it for his advantage so he could put in his 3-story building.
Right.
If you got the city, the guy issuing the building permits is crooked.
Well,
There you go, I hadn't thought about that. The
I
guy
hate
was
to take away any options that we might have. I mean, truly, if somebody uses the frauds with something that they took from us, that's a civil action between those people, or a criminal action between them. But we don't want to take away our ability to do something if somebody's like wholesale, changing, I don't know. I think if we leave it in, we can shorten it a little bit because we haven't written the city code yet. I don't know. It's not a.
I thought I read it when I did some research in a statute that if we don't say it's illegal or against our law to change our documents, then you can't do anything about it, basically.
Well, it isn't saying that it's a violation of these regulations.
Right.
Enough, I mean, do we have, because I just don't want to get into putting something in there that we don't even have yet.
Okay.
And that's my only point,
Just stop it.
punishable by the pursuit, let's stop it, it's a violation of the regulation. When we write, or if we write a code, that code will say a violation is a Class C misdemeanor, punishable by this. Do we need it in both places is all I'm asking.
Okay.
Since we don't have that yet, I mean, we're putting something in here that doesn't exist.
I could go with that.
What code would we be writing that would specify that then?
It would be the same one that you have if somebody builds something that's.
Well, that's what I'm referencing in the last sentence, though. Pursuant to misdemeanor provisions contained in city code, which we don't yet have.
Right.
We may never write it, I just say, but why put it in there when we don't have it? We've not written it because it's still a violation of the regulations, period. We want to have, if a situation comes up that we have to have a code where we have to do something to enforce a violation of that, the code can cover that.
But I don't think that I don't think that anybody maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but I don't think that any city has, ordinance such and such and such list of all of the things that you could be violating, and this is what the penalty is for. The building code has, in the building code, what the penalty is for violating the building code. It says that if you violate this, it's a Class C misdemeanor with a fine not to exceed $150. It's right in the building code. Someplace I know that I put it in there. And I think that under the health and sanitation, there's similar, language that says that, you know, if you don't abate this violation of the trash ordinance, then you're subject to penalty of $150 a day fine, or something like that.
And that's kind of the way the state code is written too.
Yeah.
It has the violations based
this
upon the
This is
section
the
that's
law,
being
this is
violated.
the consequences all in the same.
Yeah.
All in the same code. So from that standpoint, if we think we need it, this would be the place to put it in, probably, that if you alter these, you know, documents in any way, it's, you know, some kind of misdemeanor with a penalty.
I just don't know how anybody can alter.
I have access to the documents.
Huh?
I have access to the documents. I can alter any of them. I could go back and change ordinance 101, 102, 103 at any time. The ones that we have on file. Now, I can't necessarily get to the ones that are backed up someplace, but there are other people in our organization who can. Your code enforcement officer could write a citation and go in and obliterate it. He could remove records, because he's going to have the privilege to post records to that folder.
Well, but if we do what Pat's suggesting, that we just leave it there as a
Sure.
violation of regulations and code.
Yeah.
And then, as Dan says, we can add the part about altering them to the building.
To our code.
Then to me, that's a solution.
Okay. So what I've done is I've scratched out "and punishable pursuant to misdemeanor provisions contained in the city code." Just end it with the period. That's fine.
I don't think it's really saying anything different than what Dan was saying.
Okay.
Just a little different way.
All right.
The more convoluted we make it, the more trouble it is.
Like then you've got an employee who is being subject to criminal.
So we're just gonna have to put Lynn away if he's gonna.
Well,
Firing squad.
there are other, you know, there are other penalties in state law that, you know, for falsifying documents.
I mean, I could see where maybe a developer would misrepresent zoning to a customer, but that wouldn't be anything violating our law.
That would be there. I mean, that's
State law.
because, you know, we have people issuing building code zoning.
But if we just shorten it, I think we're good.
Okay, moving right along.
Which we're not.
It would just, you know, if the building inspector goes in and starts changing records, then, you know,
That's a hanging offense.
he's trying to defraud the city, and that's, you know, that's a criminal penalty.
Okay.
So,
All right. In 63, it says, when its uncertainty exists to the boundaries of the district shown on the official zoning map. I'm going to do my very best to not have any uncertainties. We're going to publish it in a form that you can zoom right in to get to every little corner and whatever. And if I fail to draw a line to the right intersection, it needs to be changed. But I don't think there's going to be any uncertainty. But if we did, the boundaries are approximate based on center lines of streets. They approximately follow the city limits. Oh, that is one concern that I have. When I took the PDF that we posted as our zoning map, the northern boundary is a straight line from one corner to the other, and it dissects some of the lots on the northern end. But our definition says it follows the boundaries of the city. And I would think that the boundaries of the city are the northern edges of all those lots, even though the map draws a line and dissects many of them across the top.
That's,
Because the border isn't straight is the problem. Or those lots extend into Missouri. I don't know the difference. I'm talking
there
about
is a
properties.
possibility. I'm not gonna open any cans of worms here by making this statement, but there is a possibility that some of the property in the northern edge of Holiday Island is actually in Missouri.
Okay,
It all depends on where you perceive the state line to be.
right.
Well, part of the water plant's in Missouri,
Yeah.
part of the campground's in Missouri too.
These are
Depends on
residential
what
lots.
map you look at. I think the part of the water department and the road department workshop are almost for sure in Missouri, because we actually discharge the sewage treatment plant into Missouri water.
And they had to get some permission from
Well, we
state.
have to file clean water permit, reports and everything.
Yeah.
In Arkansas and Missouri. But there's also a possibility that there's a few lots on the northern edge where part of the lot is in Missouri. And I don't know how that ever happened, and I think that it would require a survey. I'm pretty sure you can't just go by where Google Maps says or Google Earth says the state border is,
Right.
because that changes with the satellite angle and everything else.
Okay, in 64, class of annexed lands, the section's there, I think it's okay.
Yeah, that sounds fine.
The vacation of public right-of-ways, rights-of-way. That whole issue's up in the air. So I don't know if we want to put it here or not.
It just says it kind of reverts back to whatever the county's called it, doesn't it? I mean, wouldn't that be sort of your thought?
65.
I think it's sort of harmless to have it in there right now,
Okay,
because the city is very unlikely to vacate any street or alley or public way.
well, what came to mind was that public way that's behind Mariachi that runs toward the shopping, and what someone might have plans to do with that area. Because there is paving there. And people drive on it. It's not roadblocked. It's
So
not
you're
marked
saying
private.
it's not a street in.
It's not a street on our street map.
In the street map.
It's not, and it's not considered a street by the district either.
Right. So the street officially ends right at the corner of the gas station parking lot.
Hmm, gotcha.
That's the end of the street on our street map.
Who paves it?
I don't see.
Who's responsible for
I
maintaining
don't
it?
know this at this point. I don't see a problem with it.
I say it's been patching some potholes, you know, at least to the other side of Glenn's Auto Repair, but, you know, I think it's just that it's never required any maintenance up there, so it hasn't come up.
Where does it exit? As you come around Mariachi and get into this,
You can go off it on the gravel onto Park Drive. Right. And if you were to build a street for Park Drive past, whatever, it would intersect right across the street from it. Is where it would
There's
go.
also two other streets that come off of that one goes past what used to be the First National Bank, and the other one goes past right next to Fred's, or right next to the Dollar General.
so that's where I've always known, between Dollar General and the whole.
But that's all private streets.
So is it part of platted lots?
Parking lot.
It's parking lot, yeah.
The platted lots on the south side adjoin the platted lots on the north side. There is no street right-of-way on the plat.
Right.
That gravel, whatever goes through property. It's
Yeah,
not-
that's what I was kind of assuming you were saying, that
But it might be an
if it's not a
alley.
street,
Right.
it's a platted lot of some
Right.
sort.
You actually have to drive across, Sunfest's property to get to the storage units
Mm.
that you may rent back in there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not something that's in our street map. It's not part of under the city's venue, so
But
it's not a vacation
by
issue.
definition, then it's not a public way.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's a private parking lot, so to speak.
But there may be roads that are on our street map that one day we vacate, ones that are unpaved in some part of it. We said, we're done with those roads.
Well, there's those, I mean, some of those gravel dirt roads could be
Mhm.
considered that.
Those are on our street map.
If you wanted to take the lots that were around those and make
Well,
them green
those are-
space or something.
I think it's harmless to have it in there, because I don't think in my lifetime it's ever gonna happen.
Okay.
But,
But,
Alright. In .80, agricultural natural, I tried to deal with that because we have lots of natural areas here. And I put in that whole section of I through 5, I through 1 through 5, or I through B, trying to describe the current situation in Holiday Island.
oh, you've added this.
I added all that.
Okay, okay.
boy, then we really better look at it.
Yep,
That's what I'm thinking.
very close. So first one, I, the city adopted its planning area map that it defined the territory for which the city will develop and adopt land use, zoning ordinances and regs. 2, double I, the properties within Holiday Island Suburban Improvement District have been defined by a system of unit block lot designations. It's the intent of the city that the existing lot and parcel designations be adopted for continuity of identification. Most residential and commercial property in Holiday Island are covered by declaration of reservations, commonly referred to as covenants, that are unique to the unit in which the property lies. Although these covenants are legal agreements between the property owners and not binding on the city, it is the intent and desire of the city to preserve the current declaration of reservations to the limits of the law placed upon municipalities in Arkansas. The city intends to develop and adopt ordinances and regulations to support the current declaration of reservations pursuant to Arkansas statutes. Lots and parcels in the various units have diverse dimensions due primarily to the terrain conditions upon which they are platted. These are lots and parcels that do not fit the general description of the designated district precisely, but are included within the same district to ensure similar use as adjoining lots. The declaration of reservations includes land use designations that will be noted in these regulations where they best align with the DOR, and I gave a couple examples of how I might note that. So this was my coverage that says the definitions that we had up in 060, I think it was, don't necessarily fit what currently applies, what is currently built in Holiday Island. That's why I tried to handle the exception.
Where do unplatted lands, is that what we need to mention there?
Those are the parcels. There are lots and parcels that do not fit the general description of the designated district precisely. This is the consternation I have that how we move forward when we draw the map. What do we do with the parcels that are inside or next to zones that we already have defined?
They have no designation whatsoever,
Well, they don't uncover, they do not under current covenants.
and that,
So that's the question I have as well, Jerry. How are we gonna do it?
when somebody.
We could arbitrarily zone them. If it's in the middle of an R1 area, just hit the button and say it's R1. On our map, say that's how they're done. The city says they're R1.
Well, I thought you had a training in your state that, when they are developed, that they would be.
That's in our land use plan.
Based on the proximity of the current.
Surrounding use, yeah.
So if somebody had some acreage, up on the island there that's not platted,
We got one, we got 6 acres.
I know, and, so, this would cover that.
Right, because
Yeah.
we said that they, you know, that if somebody's gonna develop that, they have to give.
I don't see any harm in picking a zone, like R1, and driving the stake in the ground. And if somebody, owns that parcel and they want to do something other than that with it, they can seek a variance.
And that's,
Because you're gonna be facing that probably pretty soon, because I was told my next door neighbor bought the old animal farm, which is 25 acres down there,
And then there's some other that are in play too.
you can look at the map behind you on the wall, there's lots of space, it's marked parcel, and I started in my mapping with Unit 1, there are 4 parcels in Unit 1, A through F. Is that 4, A through E? Yeah.
That's the district got a great big out there parcel. And
I think it'd be incumbent on us to
Oops.
zone those, like Dan suggested, as well.
Just make it the most restrictive, and then if somebody wants to do something other than that, they can seek a variance.
Okay. Well, the map will be easier to paint. I can do the whole, only hit the button and the whole area turns the color. It's, I started on the mapping process, and the tools I got aren't easy.
the other thing you got down there is that 12 acres of Tom's house is on.
That's what I was referring to.
I mean, so, there's gonna come a time shortly that we're gonna hit it.
Well, it's even the lot across the street. It's a giant lot, and it doesn't have a bunch of lots parceled or platted on it. And it's got a for sale sign on it by the bank.
We got it all, down there around the timeshares, and yeah, that was all.
Yeah, we need to do that sooner than later.
Okay, before we do that, I think we need to seek counsel, because I don't want to be in the situation of facing a lawsuit of taking away value. Because we've restricted it, and they've sold it or intend to sell it for a different purpose.
Well, yeah, but, like Dan said, we can always, make a variance.
I mean, it happens all the time, and in the newspaper, practically every day, one of the cities in northwest Arkansas is, we're gonna rezone this because these people wanna do that, or we're gonna rezone this because people wanna do that.
Somebody,
Just
an individual or
Okay.
corporation or somebody's gonna have to buy these and, have a use for them.
But rezoning isn't a variance, right?
Nope, it's a change in
It's
the
a
zone.
change in the zone.
It's not even a conditional use. It's
Right.
just changing the zone.
Until you get that done, though, they can't do anything other than residential.
But I think that would be the way to handle it, would be to,
Yeah, just-
have them plead their
it's
case
just
and
driving
rezone
a
it.
stake in the ground so that we have a place to start negotiating from if somebody
Okay,
wants to do something different.
all right,
I have a question, though.
okay.
Oh, Are these units, are those the districts? Is that the same as a
No,
district?
What I did is I took the Declaration of Reservations and created this list of how they're currently zoned,
Uh-huh.
so that we could move forward with a plan on what zones we need.
So what is what is a district in this model?
It's a district in the state statutes has to do with the zoning. You define a boundary called a district, and its zones use is XYZ.
So
So
did
so
our,
Like a commercial
was our
district or residential
zoning map,
district or-
was our zoning map based on units?
Our zoning map will be based on what we decide it'll be, and it'll probably align with what's in the covenants.
So it'd be
It'll have,
parts of units?
Mhm.
Okay,
so the illustration in this text is like Unit 3. Unit 3, if you read their covenant, it says they're zoned R1, except, and that's what the R2s and 3s are by block and lot.
and then you might carve that out
They'll be different colors.
if there was a big enough area to carve.
It'll be those lots.
Gotcha.
Those lots 2 through 12
Okay.
and 15 through 23 will be R2.
That answers my question.
Okay.
Okay. Now, the other question I had was when Ken mentioned the animal farm got sold, I thought that was outside of the boundary of Holiday Island. Well, how come it doesn't have, I mean, when Roxanne put in her house, but when Roxanne bought the house up there at the top of the hill,
I don't know what that.
it's not in Holiday Island.
That's not part of the old animal farm.
Oh, it's not?
Yeah.
I thought it was, I'm
No.
sorry.
That house they built on the bend there in.
Yeah,
Pleasant Ridge,
that's the one I'm talking
That was always outside.
What he's talking about is the property that borders Pleasant Ridge.
Yeah, and that's what I thought
No, but
was
that-
outside.
No, no,
Roysters are on.
that's another property.
Roysters is a different area?
Yeah,
Okay,
that was always outside of Holiday Island.
okay,
Roysters is the next one over.
okay.
And, I forget, the old plumber built that there, and because somebody on the board of commissioners told them they would make a change and allow it to be part of Holiday Island, and then when it got to a vote, it didn't happen.
Right,
So he was kind of stuck.
okay.
Okay, so if there's no general need to change that, all that yellow, it's fine, I'll leave it in there.
Sounds good.
So the table then that I created with what we currently have in the Declaration of Reservations and the last column, the city zoning, is my first draft or whatever I thought we might call the zones so that we can make some distinction. If you go through that table and scroll down through them, you'll see a couple different C1s. And that's because in the ordinance or in the covenants, the people who drafted those covenants and filed them with the county, there are several definitions for what C1 is. It's unique to the unit. C1 in unit 3 is different than the C1 in a different unit. So I called it, and that's, so if you scroll down to the very bottom of that table, you'll see those differences. I captured an image of what C1 in unit 3 looks like versus C1 in unit 9 looks like. And C1 in unit 10 looks like. And I made some notes in this pile, but anyway, there are couple of them, the descriptions are the same. I can point out easily though that in unit 10, C2, unit 10 has a C2, item 25 hotels, and item 29 is motels. Those are added to C1s. But the biggest concern that I have is unit 9, where he called it C1, gave it a different name. At the title it says neighborhood commercial, then right below he renames it limited commercial. He being whoever the person is that drafted the covenant, I don't know who it was. It's a very short list.
Which
so when
unit
we
is
talk
that?
about later on in defining in that graphic that I thought we'd adopt is what is used, what permit is used, what uses are permitted. We're going to have to be very careful about what the list looks like and what's permitted in each one of them.
Shouldn't this uses permitted be something like examples of uses permitted?
And that's what it is. It's a list: bakery, bank, barber shop, and commercial.
But, so if somebody comes along and they want to open a light commercial business that doesn't happen to be listed on here, like I want to sell leather goods, is leather goods on here?
Nope.
Okay, I can't do it because it's not zoned.
Or you take the contrary because you said it's not discounted, it's not excluded, I'm going to do it.
Yeah,
I don't know how the laws work.
yeah, I don't think it works that way.
In our description, it says stores, shops, premises conduct the following types. Again, this is what's in our covenants.
Yeah, and this may be one area where we can write an ordinance that meets the intent of the covenant, but not actually the exact wording of the covenant, because I think coming up with if this covenant would have been written in 1852, it would have said harnesses and,
Blacksmith,
Conestoga wagons and.
wagon repair, and
Yeah, and, so
buggy
why
repair.
be so specific? Just give examples of what we would consider light commercial or something,
Okay,
and then leave it up to the Board of Adjustment or whatever, the zoning planning commission. If somebody wants to get a building or get a business permit or something like that, leave it up to them to decide whether or not it meets the intent of the,
of our ordinance.
of the ordinance.
Well, I wonder what number 12 means, clubs.
Well, you've got one, it's called Elks Club.
Oh, that kind, I see, because they have a building, yeah, gotcha.
And they serve liquor and meals and have meetings, and
So a club would be
a group of people.
a meeting place that serves alcoholic beverages privately.
Not necessarily.
Don't have to,
It
yeah.
could be a health club, could,
A membership oriented,
membership.
Out-
Private in
outfit.
that regard.
okay.
Yes. I wouldn't be very specific, I would give some examples of light commercial and heavy commercial and whatever.
Well, this is a nice list, maybe just add the word "for example" before the colon.
No, I think when you get into, when you start adding things like hotels and stuff, that's a little bit, that's a considerable divergence from, a antique store, so we probably need to be specific about what units can have,
And that's one that could
Hotels.
definitely be coming.
say,
That motel business could definitely be in the future.
mhm.
So because of the difference, the different lists in the covenants and the common name, I suggest in the table that we give them different names, so when we build our zoning map, it'll best align with what they're currently used for. Does that make any sense?
Mhm.
Say it with
Yep.
enough words?
Mhm.
Okay, so we're gonna end up with several commercial units because of the way they're being used now. And the attempt or the goal is to map how things are being used now. We don't have any areas that are new and don't intend to create zones for those current unused ones.
A possible way to do that would be take C1 and maybe add a dash something after that,
In
or
Unit
a
9,
C2 and dash something after that to further subdivide.
in Unit 9, I call it C1L for
Yeah.
limited commercial.
Yeah,
And then
That'd
in
be
Unit
good.
10, C1G, general.
good.
Just a
you
plain
already did it.
C2 commercial. Yep, we're on the same wavelength, that's good. 101 is an equestrian covenant, and I don't think there's any lots assigned to that.
No lots?
Didn't find any.
There's one.
Because
There
unit,
isn't one, there's nothing on the map, I don't see any
unit
lots. in the zone.
5 was supposed to allow animals like that.
Yeah, if you had enough acreage.
Unit, it's 3, 4, 5, and 6, and I think it's 11 and 19. There are several covenants that allow horses
Okay,
if you have greater than a half an acre.
okay.
I answered that question for Mickey recently because of the conversation. that
Can
we
the
had.
city impose a restriction where it's not allowed today?
The city can make it more, can the city make it more restrictive?
Or maybe even impose some regulations where it's not likely to get done?
Haven't even gotten that far in the document, how we're gonna regulate animals.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm not sure people will want this. Have you ever driven down Passion Play Road next to the horse farm and had your window open? It smells like a horse farm.
That's outside the city limits, by the way,
I knew that.
right next to the church.
But I'm just saying, that's what you're gonna get if you allow that in Holiday Island, so.
But the only thing you could actually have on in most of those units though, is billy goats.
We could cover it with obnoxious odors,
Noxious odors.
noxious odors, obnoxious odors, whatever.
So we don't address animals anywhere in here?
I don't think it does.
I'm sure there are people that have
Well,
chickens.
it must,
Probably
because
are.
we had farm animal in our description, so it's gotta be in here someplace, I just don't recall. But I don't think the word horses is in here.
I'm pretty sure that the city is going to restrict, farm animals, even though the covenant may allow it, and we'll have to see where that ends up legally.
And we'll have to figure out where to put it then. And just for your information, as you look at that chart I created, in the second column, if there's a 0, and it's in that kind of pink color, salmon color, it's because I don't have a copy of the covenant. In the first column, if it's got the orange block, I have a copy of the covenant, I just haven't done the analysis to put in the bucket. So there are a few that I did find when I researched the county records.
Just as a technicality, Wedgewood calls themselves townhouses, Ironwood calls themselves townhouses, Oak Point calls themselves condominiums. And there is a legal difference between condominiums and townhouses, and I don't remember what the differences are anymore, but I played hell trying to get insurance. When I bought my Wedgewood townhouse, I actually had to go to the insurance company to get the correct definition for the title company, because something wasn't tying. But at any rate, everything official that you'll see in Holiday Island here will refer to it as Oak Point condominiums.
Okay.
Where are the timeshares in here? What are those look like?
I don't have anything for them. I can't find any documents on that corner of our property of the city.
Well, they are a specific unit. Do you know which unit they're in?
There's 5 units in
5
that
units,
corner, 5
yeah.
or 6. No, yes,
Do you have the units listed on the table here?
Yeah, are
Yes.
they listed? Which ones are they? Do you
I don't know.
Blank.
It's probably blank. I think it's in the 100s, but I don't recall. I could pull up the map and look, but I don't think we need it for this discussion today.
No,
And
But I can get you that answer.
under,
I can look it up.
Okay.
just because I'm curious, why is Sharon Bitterroot?
In that column is called exceptions. And when you read the covenant for that section, I think it just names her as controlling it.
Really? So you do have a copy of that one?
I have a copy of 128.
Was that her,
It's
her old
published on the
place?
web.
That was her old place before she sold
It's
it.
unit 128. I'm not sure where that's
Yeah,
at.
that's probably the old place.
But it's got 3 zones in it, 1, 2, and 3.
I wonder if it got changed between her and
As-
the new people that own it.
Well, you mean it's been sold since I read this covenant?
Could be.
Okay,
She just sold it a year or so ago.
okay. The covenant that I have then may not be in the current copy, or, well, her name is listed in it as controlling those documents, those spaces.
It's right up there, right beyond the one that's for sale. It's that first house on the left going down Shields.
Okay,
That was her old house.
okay. Well, they're building something on that corner. They're
Yeah,
putting in
yeah,
concrete
yeah.
footings right on the corner. Is it a separate lot, or is it just,
Yeah,
a
the
new building.
the point that comes out
is that
there.
a separate lot from the house? They
Well,
dug foundations and poured concrete 2 days ago.
Well, if it's the one that comes toward the street, toward Woodsdale.
Yes.
Woodsdale? No, toward the bridge.
Shields.
Yeah, toward the end of the bridge.
Oh, that point, there's nothing there. I'm talking about on the west end of that strip,
I think they're just
on
building.
the corner of
They're building the garage.
Sailboat.
The person that owns that house there is building the garage on the.
Oh,
okay.
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 But it's that only house that sits there before you get to Shields.
Okay.
I can't believe these people, can't do it. Double garage, cars on site, and now you're gonna build another garage.
It's Probably so they can park their recreational vehicles indoors out of sight, not pay $200 a year for rent.
Okay.
It's interesting that the 100s, the units within the 100 range are all on the island,
Yes.
but I don't see a unit 128 on the plot map.
Could be
You
they
want me to open
platted
up?
it
I can
after
look
the
at
map.
I can look at the DOR and see what it describes it.
It could be they platted it just for her after the map.
Probably where they
Bet that's
built those ARPs, isn't it?
It's not listed under the plots and covenants.
I don't know, we need to get Alex here to tell us what's going on.
We want to take a 5-minute break. We're halfway through our 3-hour meeting.
It's fine with me. Yes, please.
More than halfway through.
Well, it's 10:30.
Oh, they haven't changed the clock.
No. So we'll recess for 5 or 10 minutes and then get back together.
Okay.
Okay.
So
For whatever
Lynn,
reason, I don't
all
have
of these
128
that
here.
you don't have, that you
Yes.
have zeros mean,
Means
you
I
don't
don't know
have
what-
them, you
right.
don't have the covenants.
Right. The orange I do. I just haven't done this part of it.
Okay, okay, gotcha. Interesting.
And when I said I had 128, I don't have it in my folder.
You
So
probably
I
did
don't-
see it at one point.
Yeah, because I went through it to investigate it. So why don't I have it? Is it online? Let's see if I got an online access. Yeah, it's working. I'll go to the city page, and then I know what I put out there. Yeah,
If I don't, my knees stop working.
don't want to throw a clot, right?
Next time we have a morning meeting, we have 2 cups of coffee rather than.
I'm gonna ask my wife to bring me another Dr. Pepper.
Wow, I wonder where 128's at. I gotta dig in my pile. I don't have a digital copy of 128,
What are you doing?
but I know I had it because I created that spreadsheet.
Dr. Pepper. I'm about through all my water too.
Unit 3, Unit 9, Unit 10,
Bye. All right.
Unit 12. I didn't bring it, okay.
Yeah, she won't deliver me with that, Dr. Pepper.
I really just.
Have you been to our city website, to my documents page where I put these reference documents out there? I copied covenants and plat maps, and I put a big legal disclaimer that I found on another city website that I thought was appropriate. Basically says, these are here for reference and the city can't be held accountable for it.
Okay.
We're not held accountable for its accuracy. And a disclaimer that you can't use it for your legal work. Okay. All right. So I don't have a copy of 128. So a map of 128. Unit 1 and 2. Don't have a map for 128. But I'm pretty sure it's a subdivided parcel, whatever 128 is. Even though in the unit that surrounds it says no lot shall be subdivided except for when permission is granted by the planning commission. So I need to go to the planning commission and find their 128 document. Berryville has just a few in their different zones. Beaver has a few. Walnut Ridge has a few.
I have executive meeting too.
I thought you got it.
Once your ex-president is advisor to the board for a year, so I got one more year before I'm out of that.
Beaver obviously honorably adopted this from somebody else.
Well, the urban,
Heavy industrial.
In Beaver?
They have all their bases covered.
for the future.
Sidebars and heavy industrial.
They had a.
That's why I'm in favor of doing the similar things here, that we go ahead and zone it, like you said, drive the state.
Yeah, I think that's bizarre. They have one business in town.
Well, their big business is that campground, so that's where they make all their money.
Well, here, Walnut Ridge, this is how they deal with the lot size. They have R1 low density residential, R2 medium density, R3
That's where
apartment.
Beaver makes all their money.
So, low density would be quarter acre lots, medium density would be 5th acre
I don't
lots.
see how we're gonna correct all the problems that district and town needs has made for 70 years,
But
Were you expecting to?
or 50 years.
We're going to do what we can do.
I mean, the district and town, they did whatever they wanted to.
We're still being important.
I mean, there's so many exceptions.
Well,
Or the developer at the time,
you can't go back in history.
okay, we're all back, so we can get back to
All the fun.
the fun.
Okay,
what are we gonna do about all these, we don't need their old designations?
well, as Dan suggested that we limit our list of permitted uses and try to do it by a few examples, and I guess we'll draft the language then that says like, similar, whatever the words are. So it leaves it to the discretion of the zoning board of adjustment if there's a complaint, or the planning commission initially. That language, I think, should include things to restrict the building officer to say, you can't just go ahead and approve such and such. You need to talk to us about it somehow, to say that, so we don't give him the liberty to interpret our law that the planning commission doesn't get input on.
In the future, as we go forward, the procedure for issuing building permits, or what, do they come before the planning commission, or the city council, or which?
If we have permitted uses defined, the authority and the person to say, yeah, it matches that, he can go ahead and do it, is my opinion.
With the building, the people.
So whoever the person is that we've assigned to issue permits.
Right. If they would be able to do that on their own.
If it's
Only
permitted
if there's a variance, then it comes.
to the planning commission. And if the decision the commission makes is contrary to what the builder contractor wants to do, he has to file a complaint, and the Board of Zoning Adjustment meets and makes the final decision. Excuse me, they make a decision. If he doesn't like that decision, then he comes to the city council. And if he doesn't like that decision, he goes to the court.
But in the process, he is supposed to give a copy of all the documents to the planning commission right up front. So you should
So
get
we
them
see what
right
he's
after
doing?
he gets them.
Okay,
So if anybody on the planning commission had a question, they could relay that to the building inspector before he granted a permit.
top of page 26, the language that follows the title where I inserted my big long chart.
Okay, so with these use definitions in C1, C2, then we work down to those.
Yeah.
So I'm on top page 26 with all this.
Yes, sir. So this is where we have to do modification then I highlighted in blue what needs to be changed, but we've had more discussion since I did this markup, so I'm going to change this whole section to do an alignment to what we currently have in Holiday Island. So we can probably pretty much just skip through it
Okay.
because it doesn't apply for what we're going to do. The only conversation I guess I might have is in the proposed, in the chart up above, unit 1 and 2, one's permits mobiles, and the other one, I think it's unit 2, says the mobiles are there or granted, but they, because of a change in the covenant, they can't be replaced. So do we want to zone it like that, or do we just call it R1?
In unit 2?
In unit 2. Do we want to zone it as the mobile homes that there are permitted, but they can't be replaced? Do we want to create a zone that says that, so it's in our ordinances that that's the way it is, not rely on the covenant to be enforced?
Do we need to? Or we just zone it the way we want it to be in the future?
That's the question I have.
I would just zone it R1.
Okay, all right. It starts with an A, counting the agricultural natural district. Okay, we're skipping that section because of the conversation we had this morning. So again, then I'll take an overhaul of the K section, uses permitted. This is what you were talking about, Dan, trying to generally describe it. And then below is the table that I'm going to create that's going to show what's permitted, what's not permitted, what requires a conditional use permit. So I have a lot of work to do to present something for what the table looks like. Unless any of these uses that are in there R1, 2, or 3 stick out and say, you know, we don't want that in Holiday Island. That might be part of our conversation today. I didn't see any other than club or lodge. I marked that, and I'm skipping down. I'm on page 28. I inserted the word bars because it's in our covenants, but we had a conversation in our last meeting that bars are not permitted.
Right.
Has anybody done any legal search? I mean, that's why I can't find it in the statutes. I couldn't find reference to bars in the Arkansas statute. I couldn't even find a statute that says they're not permitted.
I don't think there are, as far as I know, there are no bars in that.
So
Well,
we
I'm
would,
confused then because 1970 and beyond covenants were written with the permitted use of bars. It's in those copies of those.
I don't know if you can find one.
so we would treat restaurants the same way we would treat what we would typically call a bar.
Restaurants in general, I guess. It's
So
on
it would be
page-
the same.
I don't think they.
So did you look at the alcohol beverage control?
I believe I was in that section of the code.
They got some, you might go to their website, the actual, the governing body, because
Okay,
there are parts of the state statute that mentions that commission, and then the commission.
has their own rules and regs.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'll do a little bit of that on there.
I mean, I look too, but,
But the consensus for our group is we're not going to permit a bar, right? Okay.
I don't think it's an issue. I don't think that.
Well, it'll be an issue when somebody wants to do it. That's my point.
Well, I
Robert
think,
Evans expressed that at one point, but I think that should disable of converting something to a bar and game room.
well, a sports bar is what he was talking about, though, I think.
What do you call it, sports bar or bar?
It serves food, at least.
Yeah, if he serves food.
You know,
the
if, as
definition-
long as you're serving wings or some kind of
No.
hot food.
No. You have to meet the definition to serve liquor by the drink.
Mhm.
For restaurants, you have to meet the definition, and the definition is you have to have a diverse menu, which means not just wings, you have to, have a kitchen sufficient to prepare everything on the menu.
Mhm.
And you have to seat a minimum of 50 people.
Sounds reasonable.
But I didn't research the issue of just a bar.
And I didn't mean just wings. I was thinking
Well, no, but,
more
I mean,
diverse than that.
That used to be, I know over in Oklahoma, they've got the same regulation, and these bars would put in a popcorn machine and a hot dog rotisserie,
Yeah, that's-
and
Yeah, that's just getting around the law.
and
Yeah.
getting around the law.
The sidebar up here on 23, that's in Missouri.
Mhm.
Is it on the other side?
No, it's
No.
in Beaver.
But they serve food.
They serve
The
pizza.
sidebar,
Oh, Switchback is one you're talking about.
Yeah,
I think that's still in Arkansas though, too.
that's just a bar.
They do have food, I heard. It was posted on Facebook once.
I was thinking it was.
It looks like a bar.
I don't think
Beer bar, I thought.
Well, now there's a different set of rules for, do they sell mixed drinks or is it just bar?
It may just be.
Beer.
So, no,
Yeah.
yeah, you can get a beer and wine license. I mean, that's what they had and now have again, the mariachi up here.
Yeah.
But that's a restaurant.
Yeah, it's, well, I don't know if it seats 50.
And the sidebar probably just served wine and beer too.
Yeah, correct.
Anyway,
And they do serve some food though.
Yeah.
They did.
So it would be possible, we think now that it might be possible to have a bar, but it'll only sell beer and wine.
No, they still have to serve food, I think.
No, I don't think so.
No,
You don't?
Not if it's just beer and wine.
not if it's just beer and wine, that's a whole
Really?
different deal.
Really?
So if I leave bar on the list and put comma, beer and wine only, then it'll clearly define what we say a bar is permitted or not permitted.
Let me do some research on that, because I
Okay.
didn't look at that.
well, I think on the way to Berryville,
That's the one I brought up the last meeting, because
I don't think you have food.
You know, you're probably right,
Oh, I
because
know
that
what you're talking
Stonehouse
about. Okay, it's just a
place
bar.
in Eureka on Main Street, right between Local Flavor and close to Local Flavor anyway. Stonehouse, it's a wine bar, and I don't know that they serve
They
Much
do have,
food.
They do have like cold cuts and cheese boards,
charcuterie stuff maybe.
but it's not a diverse menu.
Right.
yeah, no, a beer and wine license is a separate license. So, and I didn't look at that in detail.
And also out there on the highway, the craft brewery out there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
well,
Well, that,
They have food.
so we might want a craft brewery out here. That would be a good business.
But it would have to be in a C1
Yeah.
area.
Right,
Yeah.
but we have
That's
to
good.
define, is that a permitted use or not?
Yeah.
And we have to have a definition for it, so everybody understands.
I'll get back to you on that. I'll
Okay.
look at it.
Okay.
That would
thank
be
you.
good to have.
I think we want. Yeah, a craft brewery and
Some of
I
us-
think it would be
winery.
great for
Really,
economic
winery should
progress.
be, you know,
Yeah.
There's, we've talked about it before, but if you look on the bottom of page 28, I highlighted short-term rental.
Okay.
And in the statutes or the regulations that Tontitown uses, they are not permitted in their R2, 3, and 4s, but they are conditionally permitted in their RE and R1s.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about drafting ordinances for short-term rentals, we have to know exactly where we stand legally, what we can and can't do, and what shouldn't be doing.
I think based on that state law, we're gonna have to allow them wherever.
It needs to be a conversation that we've got to understand.
No, it might be something to ask Justin.
Well, I mean, it's a Supreme Court ruling
I think you gotta do it.
that short-term rentals, well, at least VRBOs and Airbnbs, but according to the Arkansas Supreme Court, are still considered residential.
And even,
Well, let me backtrack a little bit on that. The Supreme Court ruling was specifically addressing unit covenants, not city ordinances. So the city could still,
but you can't be in conflict and hope to achieve anything.
in this particular case, if we restricted it, it would be to the, most of the property owners would think we were doing the right thing.
I agree. That's why I question about what we can do that trump the covenants. And I think we need to limit it.
I can follow up and see.
How would you limit it?
What other cities think.
Well, just
You
other
can-
cities and other states, and even in Arkansas, they put a limit. You can't have short-term rentals in with certain residential areas. You can lease a house for a year or whatever, but they don't want the.
So would you
constant-
just ban them in all over Holiday Island, or would you put them in certain units, or
Well,
what are you thinking
Green
about?
Springs has CUPs, conditional use permits.
Mhm.
And if you want to have an Airbnb or a VRBO in a residential area, you have to have a CUP, and they restrict the number of CUPs that they issue.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
they're not prohibiting it, but they are limiting it.
Controlling it that way.
And another way to control it is the regulations that you must have a certain exit, you must have a certain size
Oh, I
driveway.
totally
you must
agree with
have
that.
Fire protection, you must have inspections, you must have. That's another way to control them. So certain properties, you just can't do it because it doesn't meet the must-haves.
I'm definitely for that. I just don't think we want to ban them altogether, because any business we're gonna have out here is gonna need tourist traffic
Right.
out here. You're not gonna support the businesses on
Yeah,
people alone.
I mean, do we?
Whereas on one hand, people consider it a nuisance and a growing nuisance. On the other hand, those people are coming here for a reason.
Mhm.
You know, they're probably playing golf, and they're probably, you know,
Yeah, they're helping us pay for the amenities too. That's very
Okay,
true.
but do we know how many, I thought I saw it somewhere, how many, properties are listed as short-term rentals?
Dale Kellison said 64 were asked for use of the pool last year, or this past summer.
I did a mapping search on Airbnb and VRBO site, and it was over 60 properties were listed as available for rental at one time. Because you go to their sites and hit their map, and it puts a bullet on each one of the properties.
If you want outsiders at all, tourists at all, to experience Holiday Island and maybe can keep us supplied with people who will buy property in the future out here, we're going to have visitors out here, living out here, or spending time out here.
yeah, I think we will eventually allow it to some degree and regulate it to.
But I do
ensure
think
that
it
it's
needs to
not a
be
nuisance.
regulated.
Well, yeah, there's got to be, I mean.
Gotta
parking
be.
Situation.
Yes, definitely. We can't have them parking on the street.
And paving the front yard so you can park 6 cars on it.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen.
Absolutely.
It just,
So,
for the quality of our neighborhood, and we're talking about the need to write an ordinance to protect the community.
Yeah.
Should that be permitted?
and I think what Dan said also, by limiting the number of new applications perhaps within a certain region, would be good too, to spread them out more. And so that we could implement all these things, I think. and successfully regulate it, but not ban it.
Okay.
The problem areas are, as always, the exception, not the rule, and we don't
Yeah.
want to totally ban it, just if there's another way of controlling the exceptions.
And if the people renting are misbehaving, well, then the code enforcement officer goes there and gives them a fine that they are obligated to pay.
That could be a solution, but I was head of the condo association here, and there was a damn thing you could do to anybody.
Yeah, I mean, HICID can't do anything.
No.
That's right. But the city can,
If it has an ordinance that says
if it
this
has
is
an ordinance,
permitted.
that's right. And noise and trash and all those things can be
That's
regulated
exactly.
and cited.
Okay, at the end of that table then, we're at the, near the top of page 29. And in the Q, utility facilities, using land on unoccupied buildings requiring less than 1,000 square feet of site area are exempt from the minimum lot requirements of all districts. I mean, some of these are troubling because I don't know how it fits all of that, Alan.
Yeah. Utility, what's a utility facility?
It'd be, that's defined up above.
Oh, it
I don't want
was?
to lose place. of
Okay,
page
I'll go
69.
back, I'll
find
go
it.
back to it.
Page 69. I thought it was defined.
Somewhere in the definition.
Yeah. I thought it was.
Okay. I don't see it.
Utility major,
Or UV.
minor. It
Maybe I'm-
doesn't, it's not defined.
Okay.
Utility facility is not defined.
Major utility is like a water plant or
Yeah.
electric plant or something like that.
What
Okay.
about like
Maybe that's what it is though.
if we get a grant to do fiber optics, Rodney's expressed putting an office over here, would that be a utility? An internet company?
Sounds like a
To build an
business
office or
office.
to use a facility for an office? It falls under the use of retail and services, I think. I would put it
I
there.
mean, what if he had his equipment housed over here?
Oh, his
I don't know
trucks
that.
and,
He just made reference to it. more than
Yeah.
he-
What section are we in?
I don't know.
Q,
President,
We're on
page 29, Q.
Q, utility facilities.
And maybe they do mean that, under that
Yeah,
major utility
it might be,
definition. Yeah.
Because it's talking about unoccupied buildings.
That what Rodney would need way less than a electric plant or a water plant. He just needs a small, probably commercial office rental.
Well, the whole issue of lot sizes and what have you, it has to be, I guess when I read these, I had the future in mind. If changing and converting parcels into new uses or using them, how would they be used? How would they be regulated?
Yeah.
Because everything that's here now is going to be brought in as a legal, either non-conforming or conforming use.
Q seems pretty innocuous because it says under 1,000 feet is exempt, which seems totally reasonable.
Well, I mean, you know, if you think of, like well number 5 has got a building
Covering
that
the
houses everything. There's all these lift stations all over the place.
True.
You know. So I think that's probably what they're thinking of.
Yeah, I didn't even think of the lift stations, yeah.
Yeah.
S, residential storage sheds.
Ooh, that's a hot one.
Yeah, I don't know you exempt those, right? So you know,
How big is your general purpose garden shed? How many square feet is that?
96, 8 by 12s,
Yeah,
Yeah.
what's an 8 by
10 by
12?
10 by 14s, 140. 250 square feet for a shed is a big shed.
It's a 12 by 12.
12 by 20, it's bigger than that.
Oh, 12, yeah, 12 by 20.
It's
That's pretty
240.
big, that's huge.
It's a single car garage, 12
Yeah,
by 20.
yeah, that's
No,
big.
One car garage would be 12 by 20.
Right.
Let's
Yeah,
change
we
that
can-
to the
that's
size of
big.
some kind of small one or something.
Well, what it says is all buildings basically smaller than a single car garage are exempt from setback.
Put one out in your front yard.
Maybe just strike it all together.
Yeah, we're not gonna let that one in here.
We're not?
No,
I don't think you want to put any of them out.
Okay.
I don't think we can.
Setback means it's property line, right?
Right.
It's that
Yes.
far away from the property line,
Right.
It's like 25,
which means it's certainly in your neighbor's, almost in
Sightline.
your neighbor's business.
In their sight
I
line.
mean, that would be, if we left that in there, that would be in direct violation of
I think
the
so.
covenants.
I think so. And I think it has to be within the normal setbacks myself,
we
at
had.
Whoa, whoa,
least,
whoa,
at
whoa.
the very least.
Dan's saying that we don't even permit them, right? Isn't that what you're saying, Dan?
Well, it says that the storage sheds less than 250 are exempted from setback.
Right,
Which means they don't have to be behind the house.
right.
Yeah, and I don't think we want to exempt
No, right.
Anything.
anything from
I
the
totally agree.
setbacks.
Well, can you think of any reason why we'd want to?
The question I have is,
What
are
are the
we
setbacks?
going to regulate residential storage sheds? That's my question in my head. Are we going to try to regulate that at all?
Yeah. Well,
Are we going to say you can't have a metal building behind your deck on 32 Quail Run Drive? I got one. If I want to put a second one right next to it, can I do that? Do we want to regulate that?
Well, I think from the setbacks and front yard,
You don't do wood, you don't want those. You don't
I
want,
would say no more than than the covenants do already.
Yeah,
I
we're
would
not-
say just regulate them based upon the current
I mean,
covenants.
the situation we had over on the table, right, with the.
Yeah.
That guy had.
They had it in his front yard.
And, some neighbors filed a petition and he moved.
Right.
But it was more than 25 feet from the road, right?
No,
I think it was.
It might have
It'd be
been
close. Could you park two cars in front
25
of it?
feet, maybe.
no,
Oh, okay,
I mean, it
It was pretty close.
was.
Because
okay.
every time you drove down the street, it was right in your face,
I mean,
practically.
you couldn't see the house until you got right up on it. I mean,
Okay,
and he's moved, it's still accessible where you see it from the street, but it's on the back side of his house.
And the
which I
one
would
on La
think is-
Quinta still exists, sitting on the street,
Yep.
sitting right on the street.
right.
I mean, right
Right on
at
the
the
street.
street.
Storage sheds are not.
And there's not
5
25
yards,
feet from
5
that.
feet from the property line.
Right.
And you got one here on, coming in on Holiday Island Drive, 2 houses down from you, he's.
That's the one we're talking about, the
Yeah.
La Quinta. It's on La
5 feet from the
Quinta.
property line.
Yeah.
I just say they're not exempt from setback requirements, I believe.
So what about?
Why say anything? then?
Yeah, why say
I've seen
anything?
people where they, in a few instances where they have the lot next to them and there's a storage building sitting right in the middle of it.
That's against the covenants.
It is? Oh, to put,
To
well,
put a building on a lot only.
it's okay.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is.
From what I've read, you can't put a structure on a building that, on a lot that you don't live in. You cannot build an uninhabited building on a lot.
People are doing it.
I know they're doing it,
Doug
but
Taylor has a big building that's not inhabited.
I think that's a commercial area.
Oh, it might be. It may be. You're right.
a
That's
commercial
probably
building.
true.
They, historically, the planning commission has allowed people to build a
Shed,
big
small
garage
shed.
on the lot next door that they own, as long as it's connected some way, common drive,
Mm.
physically attached. with a
Contiguous
breezeway
roof.
or something like
So
that.
in other words, if I own the lot next door I wouldn't be able to just put my shed over in that lot and not on my lot?
standalone.
Not standalone,
No.
okay.
On the other side of the island, on, I don't remember what the road's called, and I could name the person, but I'm not going to, but there's a standalone garage that's just been recently built. There's a sidewalk, but there's no roof that connects it to the house. And this person said they went through the planning commission and followed through.
Yeah, the sidewalk may be enough to make the physical connection between the two.
Anyway,
Because, what they wanted to discourage is people buying a lot specifically and solely for the purpose of putting up a big shed to put their barn, their boat, and their RV in, and then go back to Tulsa where they live, If, as long as it's tied to a residential property, I personally, I don't see the problem with it. But that's not really what we're dealing with here.
Yeah, in essence, it's a storage shed, smaller than 250 square feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just thinking that,
Take the whole section out?
yeah, that a small storage shed has got to be within the setbacks.
Yep.
Okay,
then why do we need this at all?
We don't.
But
We don't.
We don't. Just take it out.
I'll take it out.
Take that out.
Strike out.
Still on two.
And, well, I'll just put reserved or whatever. If I renumber everything anyhow, it'll all get changed. I'll just take it out. Top of the next page, I added some words in W. This is page 30. And the 30 feet is wrong. I went back and looked at a few covenants. It's 25 feet in Holiday Island. So I'm gonna change that to 25.
Highest part?
Yeah, it's above the highest part of the lot upon which the structure is located. I copied that text out of the covenants. I think every one of our covenants has that.
Which is basically 2 stories.
I think so. The following the blue though, it's got some exceptions for those districts where the limitation is 45 feet. So whether we keep those districts, those light industrials or whatever in our zoning or not will depend on whether I keep that language in here.
I could see where you might have a warehouse facility or something like that with very high ceiling and maybe.
The covenants were here again, do covenants, can the covenants stand the test of time? When the covenants were built, the average house probably had a 412 pitch roof. Now the average house has what?
They do.
12 pitch.
They
8,
yeah,
10,
there
12,
are
12.
some that have very high
So,
pitch.
of course, you wouldn't put a pitch roof like that on top of a 2-story house, probably.
Is there
Well,
any
you might.
reason?
You might.
Oh, yeah, they would.
Oh, yeah.
Is there any reason why we need a height
Right, it's so
limitation?
it's so that the house that I have on Quail
Oh,
Run,
that
the
you can
guys that
see
build
over.
on Appaloosa doesn't block my view.
Yeah, gotcha.
Because of our scenery and the different venues, I'm sure that's why it was in the original covenants, to help prevent that.
Out those 2-story houses they got all over.
But this says in all residential zones.
Right.
So,
And virtually, I think every covenant has the
My
25
house.
code in it.
my house is.
So if
higher
you really
than
wanted
30
it and you weren't obstructing anyone else's view, you could get a conditional use permit.
You'd have to apply for one,
You could apply for one.
or, yeah.
Highest part of the lot, so if you got a lot like this,
I would think
and
that would
built
make
down
sense.
here, then that's why I'm above 30 feet.
Sure. Your house line could be 45 feet, but not above the highest point of the lot.
Right. And so, if you got one like that, you went up pretty damn high.
If you're far enough down the hill, that's right.
That's what they're doing up here. I mean, they,
Yeah,
that kind of went all there.
And that brings up here.
sure. And because of our terrain, if there was a house across the street, it'd probably be higher yet, so the 25 feet still works.
As long as you don't build up and put the house at the level of the street.
Okay, and 81, I've got some work to do there, depending on what we end up with, what we're going to use for commercials. I just highlighted issues that are different for where they are written right now.
I love how it says grain elevators and silos are not, not in conflict.
Where do you got the XX's there? What's that?
It means I have to fill in the number, because there was a number there.
Number.
It like said, I don't remember if it was 2 or 3, but there was a number there, like 3 such districts are established. They were just counting them.
Why do you need number?
Because it talks about general commercials, and they're just making it clear, I guess.
Well, I mean,
I wasn't there when they wrote these.
no, I know, you weren't.
No.
Uh,
Again,
I don't
it's a
know why you
model.
need a number.
Yeah.
Such districts are established.
Okay.
I like that, Ken.
Yeah, I'll just change the, capitalize that S. Okay. All right. In C, or, yeah. I don't
Maybe
know
you
what it is.
reserve this and redoing this section until you figure out what
Yeah, until we
ones you
decide,
want.
until we're gonna decide and define
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
Okay. Same thing with 82 then, industrial
Mhm.
districts. Just skip over it for today.
Mhm.
And same thing with 83, because it's commercial industrial.
And in fact, you know, if we don't think we need to worry about commercial and industrial and stuff like that for now, just leave it blank and put in reserved after the title,
Right.
and someday we can work on it.
Well, if our main focus is to get something on the books right away for residential, we can certainly do that. Because we can pass these one section at a time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Amend it. Okay,
Good point.
I was thinking about me building an airport airstrip.
probably not.
Yeah. But just as soon as we leave out grain silos, somebody will be putting up a grain silo.
And blocking someone's view.
Because we didn't exclude chicken farms.
Or just includes it in the view. I can see it even though I don't like it. You know?
Yeah. Okay.
We're at 83 now, skipping down through that.
So are we skipping that one too?
Yeah, I think so, because all this is commercial for a
We
while.
don't need it. We don't need it.
14083.
Yeah, and if you keep on looking at the charts and graphs, it's all about the descriptions of commercial use.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we go down to page 34 on number 84, the non-residential lot, yard and height regulations.
What it would be a non-residential, other than commercial? I mean,
So light
what are they
industrial.
talking about? Oh, they're talking about
Yeah.
those?
But it's a section that they titled that. F talks about EU, it's the special use for landfills. There might be a section that we just mark as reserved.
Yeah,
You know,
I think so.
we don't wanna overlook the fact that the district owns a lot of property,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, so some of these, you know, when we think we don't have any non-residential lots
Good point.
that aren't already being considered, well, probably we do.
A good example would be like the land above the marina. There's been several approaches to, can we use that for some purpose?
Yeah, well, right behind you.
Yes.
This is all owned by ICES, you know, and they could decide to put in a green silo.
Make a little extra money.
I doubt whether they'd ever do anything that we wouldn't be okay with, but we don't wanna overlook that.
But we don't have to worry about it right away.
Right.
So 85 talks about those things we touched on about an overlay and special purpose districts. And it says such as natural scenic beauty or man-made features while providing for development opportunities. So
Yeah,
Arkansas statutes allow overlay districts.
Entertainment district.
What what is an overlay
Yeah.
district?
What I saw from what I've read in articles, whatever, it's just, they've carved out a section of a district, and they're gonna give it something different. They're gonna allow something special in it. Creating a separate zone, it's an overlay. It's additional regulations they put on a special area.
Is there a way you could add that to the definitions? Because it's not in there.
Well, it's kind of
If we end
defines it
up
here.
The
using it.
overlay district might be something like the historic district in Eureka Springs.
I think so.
where it's actually zoned commercial probably, but the overlay district is the fact that it's a historical area and there are special restrictions on it.
And they have an entertainment district now. I think that's probably an overlay district.
Oh,
Yeah,
Okay,
So the B kind of explains it too. The city council, upon recommendation from the planning commission, may adopt overlay in districts for the needs identified in order to implement specific purposes.
so it's a district that overlays or sits on top of an
There-
already defined district.
Right, in language up above, it was called the base, which would be the commercial one, and then the overlays on top of it has
Okay.
more regs.
Gotcha.
Okay, so we just took landfill, made it reserved, and BUDs reserved. And those texts are there in that original 160 pages I think I sent out, so you can see what those are. Okay, 120, under conditional uses.
Okay.
I don't see any problems with that section. And the development standards and new guidelines, this all has to do with new areas. So I think because Town has gone from a doubling of their population in the last 20 years, that they probably did a good job of writing these sections. I'll rely on their attorney, which happens to be ours as well, that probably was involved in creating those sections.
is this where we would, with what we typically call green spaces here, the large undevelopable plots of land that the district owns, in all the different units, does that fall under this, or? I don't think we want to necessarily
No.
overlook all of those
Yeah.
areas.
I think these, well, a condition, the heading is conditional use, and we're talking about, well, if you're looking at the natural,
Yeah,
it's talking about developing an area that has a certain zone on it and how those conditional uses would be applied.
I mean, this may not be the area in the code to deal with it,
Yeah.
but we do need to zone that property somehow, all
Okay.
those green spaces, because, when we bought our lots on Holiday Island Drive, the area that backs up to our lots was misrepresented by the salespeople. And maybe they didn't know better, or maybe they just, didn't check, but they said that was all green space and it would never be developed, so forevermore, you will have a natural view off of your deck, undisturbed by development. Fact of the matter is, that was parcel C owned by Tom Dees, and he sold it to a private individual who owns it now, and he just uses it to hunt. But it's,
It can be something different.
it's hundreds of acres, and it could be developed someday. So, and the same, theoretically, the same could happen with the green spaces that Holiday Island owns, because, they weren't developed at the time. But that doesn't mean that the district wouldn't sell that property someday. I don't think there's any reason why they couldn't if they wanted to sell one of those big green spaces and, you know, turn it into a hunting preserve or something like that, that we don't have it otherwise zoned.
Are most of those green spaces that HICID owns surrounded by lots that are currently plotted? Okay, so if we take that whole area and say it's one zone, they'll be covered, it's that stake in the ground we talked about.
Yeah, probably.
Drive the stake, and then it'll create a conversation in the future.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay?
All right.
In 122, I wrote, we need to understand the impact of changes to the zoning ordinances and how it affects appeals to negative conditional use requests. Reading the last part of 56.416 may require that we have an ordinance in place to determine the process for appeals. That change in that statute was the appeals process. It usually went to the Board of Zoning Adjustment, and if the complainant didn't like that decision, he went directly to the court. And the change in the statute says they come back to the city council. That's what was changed in 416 in the last legislative session. So our language in this text has to reflect the current statute. When I get down to on the bottom of that page, and we're bottom of page 36 in section B, I highlighted published in a newspaper of general circulation. I have been watching the Carroll County News and the Independent and others, and I have seen no publications from our surrounding communities regarding planning in any form whatsoever. So I'm guessing they're not following publishing newspaper in general circulation rules. The statutes aren't really clear. The only place that we know we have an exception is what we're doing here with our ordinance. It says if you don't have a newspaper of general description, you can use boards. But it doesn't give us that exception in a lot of the places in the statutes. It doesn't offer the alternative. But I'm guessing that that's what those cities are doing. They're taking that exception and using their boards.
Another question for Justin.
I suppose.
Because they don't have it.
Yeah, they don't have it.
Newspaper in the city.
Right.
Municipal league may be able to answer a question about that.
Okay.
What's acceptable?
At one time, I was going to inquire of those publications, what their circulation is in Holiday Island, just so we can see how general it is. But when there's only 15 copies of one of those papers put at the grocery store, and I never get one, it can't be very general.
Well, and a lot of people just pick them up in town when you're in town on.
But I'm one of those people who never gets one because the stack's gone.
Well, if you try to get one in Holiday Island, that's true.
Okay.
They don't supply enough to Holiday Island. And I don't know if you could call that general circulation either.
I don't know that it's
when
circulated.
It's just put into a bin.
I think the only one that would qualify for general circulation would be the Carroll County News.
Yeah.
So
I don't know about Arkansas, but Oklahoma, general circulation means circulated in a community, but you have to be, you have to charge for it. It can't be a free public.
So it's subscribed, in other words.
That's why I say that I think the only one is Carroll County News, really.
and I subscribe to that. It comes to my mailbox.
Is there any definition as to what percent of the population has to actually subscribe in order to be
I don't know
considered
about
general
Arkansas, but in
circulation?
Oklahoma, no. I mean, it's generally, if it's offered for sale, it's community.
Yeah, the definition of general circulation may be available, not actually read.
I subscribe. And the reason I've been paying attention is because I see development happening in Berryville. That's where the Carroll County News is published. And I see nothing of anything the planning commission is doing in the paper.
True.
Unless there's a news report that some
But they would
reporter
only
did.
have to, or is this talking about regular meetings, or is this talking
No.
about if a hearing is required to consider a zoning variance?
Well, the notice of the hearing in 2B at the bottom of page 36.
Yeah.
Upon determining that an application is proper and complete, the zoning official shall ensure that the matter is set for public hearing before the commission.
Right, so that's if somebody's seeking a variance, it's gotta be a public meeting, and it's gotta be a hearing, and it's gotta be posted in a newspaper of general circulation.
But if
You
you,
might not be seeing anything because you may not have to grant any variances to allow what's going on. But you're right, there does seem to be a lot of construction going on this side of Berryville.
but wouldn't we be doing it, we might be doing a public hearing, but wouldn't we be doing it in just a normal planning commission meeting or something?
Well,
Would we
from-
schedule a special one for each one of these?
That's the notices I'm seeing in the newspaper for the big cities in Northwest Arkansas. They put a notice out that so-and-so petitions to do this for this. And some of the communities might have 4 different hearings in the same meeting. And those communities will list in the one notification, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what's gonna happen. Others, you can read them, and they spent this much money on an article or posting for all of them occurring in the same meeting. So they make a separate notification for each petition.
Gosh, that'd be expensive.
That's what it is, and they put on the bottom of it, they spent $135 for that, and $160 for that, and $125 for that. In last Sunday's paper, and this is a different subject, but the Washington County spent like $40,000 listing their delinquent tax records, and it's a huge amount of money they spent to list those.
Lynn, if you want me to, I'll explore some of that.
That'd be good. The concern I have is, what is our requirement for a city of the second class when we don't have a newspaper published here for posting notices? That's my concern.
Yeah, well, I'll figure that out, but you mentioned like, the expense of the Democrat Gazette.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they did deliver one day a week out here on Sunday, I think, but I don't know if we're distributing it online,
I pay $30 a month for my online
I
subscription.
know I do too.
Yeah.
But this past Sunday, they had Washington County.
Right.
Delinquent.
Taxes and
tax
property,
rolls.
yeah. But they put in that article how much they spent, and one section was like 34,000, the other was whatever for all those pages. But there
I've
are,
got to think the intent of the law can't be for Holiday Island, Eureka, or whatever, having to publicize into a statewide newspaper.
yeah.
That was supposed to be. Of course, you gotta realize these are written at a different time. These regulations,
When-
every city.
When there wasn't social media and there was only newspapers to get,
Every town. had its own
information.
little newspaper.
yeah.
Well, I'll do some research on that, maybe call someone out from the municipal league and see just what we can do.
What do we need to do for publication requirements? Okay, thank you. So in bullet
So
2.
I'll go visit some bars. And then,
Report back.
In bullet 2 at the top of page 37, it talks about notification to the property owners surrounding those areas. And I read this kind of notification in different forms in different ordinance or different regulations of different towns. Some don't do it at all. Others do it extensively. And one of the cities I read, they put a sign up that's 2 foot by 3 foot. This property has a zoning request or something, and notification of the meeting. Another one says they send registered letters to the surrounding neighbors. How much do we want to do in Holiday Island to notify surrounding property owners?
This says the applicant shall.
Boundaries of the subject property, there ain't very many people who will be in that area.
You're right, the applicant shall. I mean, it's how they're doing it. They're mandating
Yeah.
that the applicant would notify everybody.
The responsibility falls on them.
Right, but to what level do we want to put that notification out? Whether we do it or they do it or whatever.
I mean, that's saying that the person requesting the permit is responsible.
Right.
For that notifying.
I would
Right.
say only do what the Arkansas statute requires myself.
And if
That
they
minimum,
have 10 days in there.
whatever that is,
I would
okay.
say that's good. You say county town had 10 days,
Yes,
I go with it. What other value you gonna come up with?
the question, the concern, like Linda said, is to what amount of notification should we provide to the neighboring residents? And she suggested we only do what the state requires us to do.
Such evidence that consists of smart certified receipts.
Right, but if the state statute doesn't say we have to notify surrounding residents, should we, is the question.
That's the question.
No, I think that's a good point. I mean, if it requires just a sign that says this property under,
Well, it might be all it requires is in one, published in a newspaper, that we're gonna have a hearing.
yeah, I mean, it could.
I think that's all it says, in my recollection. I think that's the only thing it says for notification. We'll have a hearing, and we tell people we're gonna have a hearing.
And you can have, maybe in our notice of the hearing, we put the property addresses that
Yes,
we're
we have to
hearing.
do that. Mhm. They give, in the postings I've been clipping, they give the legal description, and then they also known as 32 Quail Run Drive.
Mhm, mhm. And then if people want to keep up with it, they can.
I believe that's all the statutes have, is you have to do a public notice you're going to have a hearing. They don't do what 2 says.
I wonder how Eureka does that, because they always have those hearings and they list the addresses. Usually the newspaper article lists the addresses that they granted or they heard.
A newspaper article does,
Yeah,
but it's not posted as an official
But-
public notification.
but I'm wondering if Eureka posts those addresses someplace in advance of the meeting, like on the agenda
Oh,
or something
probably.
like that.
Probably, yeah.
I'm wondering which variances have to be done in a public hearing. Is it every time, anytime the planning commission is going to issue a variance, like if somebody says, I want to do something, but I'm going to be 2 inches over the setback in my yard, do we have to have a public hearing to tell that person it's okay?
Well, the Historic District Commission lists it every time they're gonna paint a door green or something.
We don't have that situation here.
No, but I'm equating the kind of,
Yeah,
equating it perhaps. I don't know.
I think a variance is a variance, and in order to conduct public business, you have to let the public know you're granting a variance. They have to come to a meeting, and a decision has to be made, and a formal approval by vote has to occur.
but I don't think you have to buy a public notice. I mean, you can do it through your regular agenda.
That's what I'm
your
thinking.
Planning commission agenda.
Well,
Hearing-
I see this kind of as 3 levels of consideration here, maybe, and I can't imagine that they all need to have a public hearing. One level would be, it's so trivial that the planning commission can just say, go ahead and do it. The next level may be a little bit more sensitive, so you're gonna wanna put it on your next meeting agenda, have the person asking for the variance come to the meeting, make their case, and if anybody wants to object, they can come and make their case too. The third level would be full-blown public hearing, where the public is notified in the newspaper and everybody, and it's scheduled as a separate event with its own agenda, and everybody can come and have their turn at the microphone to express an opinion on it.
But how does level 1 get done without a meeting? You said the planning commission just grants it out of hand. How does the planning commission do it? you must be talking about the planning commission chairman doing it? Or something, which is, who
No,
gave you that
well, I mean,
authority?
it could still be done in a meeting. It could still be done.
Well, if it's done in a meeting,
but-
it's gonna be on an agenda.
That's right, but you.
Okay, so maybe there's only two levels.
That's what I'm suggesting.
Well, maybe our answer is in section C, the next section.
Mhm. Okay.
City Planning Commission review and action, there's a lot of text there, and it talks about recommendations and following the recommendation. And they shall forward the application and recommendation to the council, and then 2 talks about in approving such a use. And then D is the aggrieved petitioner has some action he can take. And then finally, E, in no case shall the City Planning Commission or the council authorize reduction from minimum requirements of these regulations, height, setback, blah, 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 in connection with the variance requested by the, skip too many words. I think the procedure, is defined in C, D, and E.
Mhm. D is the appeal, C is the first hearing of it, and D is the appeal.
I think so, yeah.
I just want to make sure that we don't have to have a public hearing for any trivial little request, unless that's what the law requires. If that's what the law requires, then we'll have public hearings.
But a public hearing, doesn't have to be different than the public meeting.
Well, it's a little bit different agenda. You have to allow people to address the issue before you take a vote.
Or be present.
You have to allow them to come to the podium before you vote, before you take
Well,
action.
they would be able to at any meeting.
That would be, that's right. If it's a planning commission meeting, it's on the agenda.
They could be
Right.
here.
So we have to have an agenda that allows that. Right now, our current agenda doesn't have public comments before we take any action.
It's not a public comment, it's an order of business.
Right, okay. Our current agenda doesn't allow for that. Our current agenda has public comments after our actions. So we'd have to have it moved up.
I don't know.
I don't know.
We, as a courtesy, we allow public comment when we're talking about something important, but it's not required by
I see
our
what you're
agenda.
saying, yeah.
So,
The second line of that, the city planning shall review at its regular schedule, at which time interested persons may appear at the required public hearing. So the public hearing is in conjunction with your meeting.
Yeah.
So it's not as,
okay, well, if simply being on the agenda of a regular meeting constitutes a public
well,
hearing,
that's what.
I
they're-
guess I'm fine with that.
That's what.
But
they
that
said.
means that our agenda has to be published in a newspaper of general circulation
Maybe.
if we're gonna be considering
Maybe.
a
I
variance.
can't believe that.
I don't either.
Well, that's,
That's what it says in this statute, or in this rig.
Okay.
That's what it says in.
I can't believe it. I came from a city of 16,000, and there were all sorts of variance requested that came before the Planning and Zoning Commission. And,
You didn't do a public notification in the
No.
newspaper?
no.
Because the Arkansas, or the
Yeah,
Oklahoma.
but there were some that, zoning changes that you had to do that.
But not conditional use requests.
No, if somebody is, needs a 2-inch variance on setback, the code enforcement people would recommend, and the planning commission would approve it
as an agenda item.
as an agenda item. But, if there was something
And-
consequential that affected a lot of people,
Yeah,
and you mentioned the letters, some of those bigger things, there were certified letters sent out. And what I can't remember is who paid for those.
Well, that's a
Yeah,
good,
no,
good
that'd probably be
idea.
the way to do it,
Yeah.
is put the burden on whoever.
I just think that there's, in practical terms, there's degrees of importance and public concern. And I wanna make sure that our ordinance reflects that. If somebody wants, needs a variance to extend their deck in the back a couple inches into the setback, that's one level. That doesn't affect anybody but the property owner. If the owners of parcel C on the west side of Holiday Island wants to put in a chicken farm, that is of consequence to everybody in the city, and we would want to have public hearings.
Well, then maybe
So-
we write this to affect that
Yeah,
purpose.
as long as our ordinance here reflects
That
that
they're
flexibility,
multi-levels.
that,
The planning commission or the chair can
We
decide
just-
what
we
level
just need
it
to
falls
get a
into,
clear,
and they're handled differently.
Understanding of what state law requires, and,
Yeah, as far as
Yeah.
publication, I think we ought to go with what state law only requires, but as far as having a hearing that allows people to comment and be notified via the agenda or whatever.
the tricky part might be putting, coming up with the right terminology to be able to deal with the judgmental aspect of,
Yeah,
okay, this is trivial, this is obviously trivial, this is obviously major, and then you work to the middle, and then, boy, is this one on this side of trivial or on this side of trivial?
When you come to those, you
Well, the
you err on
commission-
the side of over notifying.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the
So then
commission could have a say in it
the-
when we're approving the agenda too.
Yeah, the planning commission, I would say, would have to take a vote on whether or not they think a more formal hearing is necessary.
And we could alter our meeting rules to allow for this public hearing type forum too.
They just ask public comments on the item.
Okay.
Did you take all that
Got
down?
ready?
You get all that down?
It's on the recording. I guess what I'm hearing is 122, the procedure for authorizing the conditional use is defined here, and it's pretty close except for the questions that we have about the end of page 36 of how we notify people.
Okay,
So unless, and again, I've taken the approach that, okay, this looks good today, but 3 months from now, we've got a snag with our problem, we'll fix it.
Yeah.
Fix it
That's
3
right.
months from now.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Okay,
You're not gonna get this thing. So
Totally
there's gonna
agree.
Some issues up that we're gonna, have to finalize it.
sure. But if we don't put,
You
if
got
we
a
don't put it on
starting
paper
point.
and put it in place, we don't have anything to start from. Okay. 123, the effect of the approval,
No permit.
I don't have any
shall be
problems
issued.
there.
No.
In 140, general description, I have a problem with subject to the limitations herein, accessory buildings and the use of permitted in all zones. Accessory buildings has been the topic of conversations in Holiday Island.
Let's see if that's defined.
It says in
Accessory
this,
building.
An accessory building is a subordinate building or a portion of the principal building, the use of which is customarily incidental to the dominant use of the principal building or land. Accessory building use is one that is customarily incidental. So,
A garden shed would be an accessory
right,
building.
because, yes, because they don't live in it. And the primary use of the zone is residential.
Mhm. But you might need it to store your tools.
Well, I've got
Whatever.
lawnmowers and ladders and wheelbarrows and whatever in my little tin building. It's packed full. So the question is, are these accessory buildings permitted in all zones?
I would think so. I think so.
Okay, I'm gonna take the highlight
I
off.
mean, if you go down here, and it tells us.
And it does say located on the same lot.
Okay, cool. Location requirements.
Wait a minute, what's the second, that last line there in 141? Unless otherwise provided herein, provide the site visibility is not restricted. Signs, fences, and walls should be allowed within setback. Okay,
Oh, he's in the next
so
paragraph.
you're ahead of us, I think.
That's okay.
Not saying
We have to make sure that some of these things don't conflict, some of these things are in the building code too, you know.
Right,
We gotta make sure they're not conflicting.
yep.
Those person, okay. I was location requirement standard, we were talking about sexual use.
Well, I think the biggest problem, or the biggest thing we have to work on, it's not big, but the site visibility is not obstructed. And I think the word means sight line. We need to put the word sight line. I believe that needs to be in there.
But
And there's a way to calculate the sight line that has to do with intersections and that kind of thing.
But it's qualifying because it says it's within the setback, so setback.
The setbacks may not, even though there's a property line and a setback, it might conflict or create a problem in a sight line of an intersection. Let's stay a little closer, but I don't understand what this, honestly, I don't know what this little graphic, this little chart is. What does 100% of R1 mean? Or 67% in an R4? I don't know what that means.
Oh, these percentages?
Yeah, because it doesn't talk about, is it floor area? It must be the floor area of a principal use.
Yeah,
So it's limiting the size of that building based on the floor area
of the principal building.
Okay. So in an R1
Oh,
or
this
R2,
is
in their
not good.
definitions, the principal, the accessory building could be just as big as the primary building.
No. Let's change that.
Okay. But R1, R2, R3 in our heads,
Okay,
right?
accessory buildings in all zones shall not exceed the gross floor area of the principal use or as noted below. So that's what it's saying.
Okay, all right,
That you have an R1, you can have an accessory building as big as the house.
right.
No.
Okay. What should it be then?
I think both.
150 square feet.
That's what it's saying.
Oh, so not a percentage, but just a specific amount.
Well, do
Okay.
you want to have a huge warehouse
So-
sitting on your lot next to your
Put a
house?
specific square footage rather than percentage.
Okay, is a garage an accessory building? Yeah.
Maybe if it's detached.
Yeah, it would be. Okay. All right. I'm not opposed to that. How big is it gonna be? Because a garage, the one I want to build on my property, on the one behind me that I haven't done yet, it's a single, and an RV size in the middle.
Oh, yeah,
It's a big place.
I bet people would want to put that if they could put it behind the house. I mean, it'd be
Well,
fine.
it'll be beside the house, but it's going to be behind the house on 32 Quail Run.
In all zones shall not exceed the gross floor area of the principal use or as noted below. So,
Well, we need to-
R1 says you can build on 100.
Right. That's what they have in their code.
You have to have a big lot.
Well, what if you have a 800 square foot house?
Yeah,
You're only talking about a 20 by 40 accessory building.
and they really need a garden shed.
I don't know. I'm just saying, if you have an 800 square foot house, 100% would be 800 square foot attached or unattached building,
Yeah.
which is 20 by 40. That's barely a double garage.
If you got a
No, it's not. It's a
4,000
nice
square foot house,
I understand. And we have some of an example of those big accessory buildings on the road that we put on flags out there at the top of Sailboat. They're out on the ledge, not bothering anybody because it's a 150-foot driveway.
How big
They've
are
got a
they?
great big garage out there and another building beside it.
Okay. Well, what makes sense? And it's
Well,
not, does not destroy
I have
the
no idea
looks.
what makes sense.
Basically, we're talking about accessory buildings that are on the same lot.
Yes.
You know,
That's
now,
what it said.
now what about if they build that accessory?
But they may
building
have an
on
acre and a
the next
half.
door lot, on the lot they own next door, and they have a sidewalk connecting
True.
them.
Well, that's, we talked about that earlier, whether that means a continuous roof or, a sidewalk or a driveway extension back into that.
What if someone wanted to put a guest house behind their house?
We see that too, don't we?
Do we see that? Do
Don't
we
we
have
have
any
that on Table Rock
examples?
Drive? Isn't that a guest house hanging out there on the side? It looks like a home to me.
Oh, you mean midway down there?
Yeah. And then,
Between me and Jerry?
and then on table, on
Where is that?
Rocky Top Circle, is that a guest house
It's
behind
just-
that house? I don't
it's
know what
just
that
up from you
pavilion is
toward
back
me.
there, but it's something.
And it's on the other side of the street, or it's on my side of the
Your
street.
side of the street.
Yeah.
And there are two buildings.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks kind of like two buildings kind of connected.
You've also got that up
Well,
between
it
the
is-
buildings up there.
It is, you can come in, the person doing it could request a variance. So you would want,
They need a variance if we say it's not allowed.
right,
Right.
so you would want to set these sizes here at what you would decide would be minimum or maximum, so if it's an R1, you would normally not want that to be bigger, not, probably no more than 50% of the original building.
I think we got a lot to consider here.
Yeah, this is a good one to think about.
I'm gonna think
Multiple
about this.
buildings on the same lot, we have multiple buildings on two lots. We have, the possibility of one very large building spanning two lots.
I don't know. You
Because
got.
we have all those variations right now.
Yeah.
Well,
And what do we want to do about the future?
Yeah, we need to think about that.
And if you have some big lots, particularly, I mean, like the
an
lot
R1
that I own across the street from my house, it goes way the heck back, kind of like where you live on that side of the street. Those lots are really long
Yeah.
back from the street.
You gotta-
You could put a motel back there, for God's sake.
You gotta remember, these zoning definitions you're using here, R1 is an acre lot.
I know, that's for theirs, that's correct.
So,
It's different here.
If you've got R4 lot, which is,
There was 8,000 square feet.
8,000 square feet, you get.
They have it 2/3 the size.
2/3, which is
Right.
still pretty.
It could be pretty large.
excessive.
Right.
I mean, it really get weird. It'd be excessive, and it wouldn't fit. I mean, you'd have trouble building something that without being more than your set off or setback and everything else. From a practical standpoint, you can't do it.
Separation or anything, so, I mean.
Because there's other things that get some really weird crap here.
Why don't we make a list of all the
Options.
configurations that we know exist today?
Yeah, because the two lots that I own are fairly narrow at the front, at
Mhm.
least on the street. And then, but they're real deep and they fan out. And I could, if I ever wanted to, I could easily build, I mean, they're 8/10 of an acre each lot. I could easily build a house on the street and
A
nice-
greenhouse in back of your house, for instance.
Well, I wouldn't do that, and I don't know that we ever want to allow two dwellings on the same lot, but certainly I could build a big workshop back there.
Yeah, and there are a lot of ones that have workshops on them,
Yeah.
you're right.
And I wouldn't see anything wrong with that,
Right.
because.
If it's behind your house, it's hidden.
Behind the house, there's nobody behind it.
What about a situation, it's you own the adjacent lot, it's a wooded lot,
Mhm.
and you leave a buffer between the building and the street, whereas.
That it's set back, way back,
Set
in other
way back.
words. I agree with you.
That's what I want to do.
Well, we definitely want to write the zoning ordinance
Well-
to accommodate what we want to do.
Well, let's provide Lynn with our own lists of things that we know exist or we want to let us exist.
Yeah, that we think would be totally.
Acceptable,
Okay,
yes.
so we can describe what the future looks like.
Right,
Okay.
right. Is that fair enough?
You gonna bring pictures
We
and plat layouts?
do your sketches.
Oh, you don't want me to.
To me, it's not what they do so much as it is how they do it.
Uh-huh.
There are
Well,
some of those, there's houses here in Holiday Island that have the house and then, 3 garages. And, and the last one in the spring is a RV garage, but they're done really nice. I mean, they're first-class construction. They look nice.
Weird though, doesn't it? You know which house it is.
Point, could you not make this a conditional use requirement?
the conditional use comes in when what someone wants to do isn't contrary to what we've established.
I know, but what we're saying here is.
Actually, this is conditional use.
This is accessory
Trying to
uses.
set down,
Okay.
set it in the acceptable
I'm not sure what the difference
limits
is.
of which we would allow for an accessory building is gonna depend on the situation. Rather, I don't think you can, I don't know how
But
you,
paragraph 142
can
does
write
cover the
something.
uses.
that would prevent a bad situation develop.
That's true, yeah.
Unless you make your limits very restrictive and then make,
Well, maybe that's, like Linda just pointed out, 142 talks about the use of these accessory buildings.
That if we, describe the uses that we're gonna permit, that would help us.
so right now, the governments don't allow you to do, suppose they don't allow you to do any of that on your own.
That may be.
Residential lot.
But the problem is, I don't think state statute says we can disallow their use for their construction.
Well, they've been doing it for a long time.
Right.
It's a good question. Do you know, is there a statute that you read about that?
That we can't restrict.
Uses?
Yeah, I think I read one, but I can't say for sure.
Okay, that would be good to research, wouldn't it?
What gets going in my mind is all the different zoning I've been reading from other
Well, these are
communities.
accessory uses, not accessory buildings.
Right, well, they are buildings, well, garages, carports, off-street parking, household storage buildings.
But down in B, you're talking about how existing structure is used.
Yeah, it's talking about putting stuff in your house. I don't see that we're talking about a different building.
The title is residential accessory uses.
And in the list, it's buildings as well as other stuff.
But if you look at B, go down to the whole section about home offices.
Mm-hmm.
And we had this issue in Oklahoma. People were doing, like CPAs were doing
Right.
taxes, and they would erect signs in their yards,
Mm.
Advertise their business.
advertising their business. I think we would, no one.
We could disallow that.
Yeah, that would be in the sign ordinance, but this, it kind of sounds like you could build an accessory building to be your home office.
It does.
Yes.
I'm not sure we want to do that.
But people may be calling their workshop their home office too.
Well,
I guarantee you there's some people that like do woodworking and all that they're selling out of workshops. You see it in like Facebook Marketplace all the time.
Well, there in B under this residence, it's talking about conditional use permits.
C1 barber shop or beauty shop that would require an upgrade in electrical service. You won the heck of a clippers at 220.
No kidding.
Well,
220 volt clippers.
no, you might have built a garage with no AC in it, and you need to have lights and whatever. So you have to have an electrician run the wiring.
the way it reads.
I know.
It sounds like, yeah, that's a heck of a turd.
Power your air compressor to blow
I
your,
was young, we probably needed a 220.
Well, we're kind of, scratching our heads mode here,
Yeah.
and it's 11:59, and
Oh.
I think we're gonna quit at noon, right?
yeah,
So maybe we need to gather our thoughts on 14-142 and that'd be a good place to pick up the next time.
okay.
Why did that seem real clear when I read through it the other night, and then we're sitting here and people bring up things that's not clear anymore?
Right.
Now I have to think about it, thought I had it all figured out.
Makes you think.
And that's why going through this, I made these areas that I can't decide this on my own. We need to talk about
Yeah.
this stuff.
And
None
your
of us.
question, I think, is because a lot of people have already done things that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Maybe predictable.
Well, yeah, you bring up ideas that for some reason that I didn't think of when I read it.
Right.
That's, okay. Well, I gotta get ready for another meeting anyway, so.
Move to adjourn.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn.
Point of order, should we finish our agenda?
Oh, good point.
All right, no new business, public comments?
We only have one participant. Are there any public comments on Zoom?
Is there mic on Moses?
She went to sleep. You put her to sleep. Thanks for the.
I guess not. Don't see a raised hand, no comment.
You guys factor in.
Oh, wait a minute. I do have two chats here. One of our participants who had to leave early says they had to go. It was really interesting. She'll try to send in a letter addressing her concerns or wishes. So, and she also said she had signed up. Oh, should I have signed up to address the commission? She saw that there were public comments after all the business is conducted. And does it adjourn at a set time? Well, evidently she had to leave before we got to this point. So,
When we created the meeting, we didn't set or plan an adjournment time.
right. And yeah, we may want to revisit where the public comments are, or allow for them to be put into the business areas or something like that. Don't know how.
Well, if we were voting on something today, yeah, but I mean, it's not a workshop, but we could, just only for discussion purposes only.
Right. We called it a special meeting so we could approve minutes, but we could have had a workshop and done what we did today.
We certainly want to invite public comment and public input into this,
Absolutely.
but I think we need to have it boiled down to 90% of what we think is
I
the
agree.
final product before we roll it out to the public.
Okay.
Also, you gotta remember that you got a very tight schedule.
Well, that's why we may just say we're going to pass an ordinance to adopt, basic residential stuff and fill in the blanks afterwards. Okay, moving on then to commissioner comments. Hearing none, moving on to scheduling regular meeting. Our next regular meeting will be December what?
Second Tuesday?
The 14th.
Yeah,
We need another meeting.
That's almost a month.
yeah, it
We
is.
need another meeting.
Yeah, we
like this
need another meeting or two.
Because we need, by the time we get that regular meeting, we need to be able to.
Next week's Thanksgiving, so
Yes.
if people are traveling, that might not be a good time, but the next week,
Yeah, the week of the 29th.
yeah,
November 30th is a Tuesday.
November 30th. The Tuesday, November 30th.
That's,
We're gonna have a meeting in November.
Well, that's
that's what we're discussing.
I could do it at 9 on November the 30th. I can't do an afternoon.
It's a
So
lot.
November 30th at 9 o'clock.
That works.
Okay.
9 to 12 again.
Okay,
Now, I would highly request people to put some time in on this between now and then. We don't wanna just pick up with the head scratching where we left off. We wanna be able to kind of nail this down and get moving. Okay. So we'll have a special meeting on the 11th, on the 30th, and then our regular meeting on the 14th. And
Okay, the regular meeting is December the 14th.
yes.
Where would we find references? Just look at other cities, I guess, right? Or maybe- but I don't know. You're not gonna find this kind of detail in state statutes.
No. Would it be beneficial to you folks if I sent you the copies of the zoning regs that I've collected? So you don't have to go find them? I'm willing to do that. They're just documents I can attach to an email.
Yeah.
And what you do is do word searches on them, that's easy, that's how I find stuff.
I mean, I have no points to reference this kind of situation, questions we're coming up.
I think you'll find that some cities are quite detailed, like probably County Town, and then other cities may just be real, and their whole zoning ordinance may fit on 4 pieces of paper or something. So that's what I found when I started doing other like building codes. Some cities have their whole building code on 2 pieces of paper, and other ones, it's, 70 pages long.
I'll send them out, use them as you like. If you don't want, it's fine. I'll just send the ones that I've been looking at, so that you have those for reference.
Okay. Either that or ask the municipal league, I'm sure you've already been through there.
I haven't contacted them at all, other than initially I asked them for guidance and I got no response.
Okay.
I asked for.
I would think that they would know a city, town that had what they thought was a good set of code.
Well, like I said in the introduction, I chose Town because they have the same attorney. And they've gone through growing, and they live next to larger commercial areas, and it's,
I know a small town, town about our size that is really growing, and that'd be rich. And the conversation I had with the mayor over there was very, very positive when I was looking for a lawyer.
That's where all the growth is coming that way from Bentonville to Rochester.
I mean, they've got new subdivision there,
There's some that I don't think will be a benefit to us like Eureka. I mean, that's a whole unique situation, the historic district. I mean, they limit the kind of businesses they want. God will never forgive them for tanking the Sonic deal.
All right, motion to adjourn,
I'll move we adjourn.
second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
I got the music turned off.
This is a really good pen, I guess I have to.
You borrow it?